He can sense that this person is an absolute powerhouse. He then walked towards the dungeon. Meanwhile, the Sword King secretly wondered why many strong individuals had confirmed that he lacked internal power, yet he seemed so powerful in my eyes. Just then, Sword King appeared behind everyone. I have already laid out a net of heaven and earth. No need to worry. Although the man does not know who this person is, I accepted his treasures under the pretext of that. Promise to release him. After he escapes, he will definitely find a hiding place. At that time, you must kill him. That was a killing intent, wasn't it? With that, the smile on his face deepened. His aura instantly surged. Soon after, the man arrived outside the dungeon with the strong members of the Sword and Blade sect. He informed everyone that the demon god's body had already recovered significantly. Thus, the man told the demon god that he would create a chance for him to escape. After saying that, he turned and left. Not long after the man left, the demon god revealed a smile on his face. At night, the man came to the dungeon again. He looked at the demon god with a smile on his face. The man knew well how powerful he was at his peak, so if he wanted to eliminate him, he had to do it before he recovered. Soon after, the man's body began to emit a golden aura. Although it was only for an instant, he knew he was not far from success. In that case, you're dead. To get the demon god's words out, although this was not difficult, but he did not let his guard down, because he knew, these guys ultimately make a living with swords. The intensive last step. You must take that step yourself. So he began frequently moving back and forth between both sides. One side was to extract the last step. The other side was to deceive the Sword and Blade sect. Upon hearing this, the U army simply said 3 words, go after them. Inside the dungeon, the man realized, the risk of staying here was so high, then something must be gained. The Toad finds those warriors from the U opera. It made him quite unhappy. Although a few people died in this war, they still had little ambition. Their minds were filled with greed. Feilong does not leave. Instead, she requests Tianlong to give her a gold medal as a sister. The latter, upon hearing this, is momentarily taken aback. Inside the 10,000 people building, Yu Jun smiles and tells the children, even if everyone else dies, I will be just fine. At this moment, the Dragon Dance is holding a meeting to discuss achievements and rewards. After the meeting ends, the warriors of Tianlong Gate have all returned, and the triplets are in the crowd, eagerly awaiting their father's return. But even by dusk, they haven't seen their father. The triplets are all very worried. At that moment, how did such a guy manage to train his body like that? But if I can fill in his shortcomings well, he'll still be very useful to me. Outside Dragon City, with the end of the war, it seems it will take another half a month to recover. My senior brother is really quite foolish. What's the point of doing something earth-shattering? What good is a worthless title like 5 Bloods, Double Restraint? However, it seems his disciple has just learned the Vajra energy. Maybe I can extract something before getting rid of him. Not long after the man left, the demon who had just been lying on the ground suddenly stood up unharmed. He looked at his body with a smile. Oh, so you are a disciple of Brother Ma. The man was stunned. He ignored the demon god. Instead, he turned and walked out of the dungeon. But this also changed his mind, not revealing the whereabouts of the child. She even tempted the man to join her. This inevitably angered the man. However, what he said next shocked the man. Your master is Ma. Yet now he has had his tendons severed by someone, left to rot in a dungeon. Even so, when questioned by the man, he still appears treacherous and cunning, using him to eliminate the 36 leaders. He also said he had already spoken to the strategist about something to make him reflect deeply. These words only strengthened the man's resolve to get rid of him. He is a madman who takes pleasure in fighting. There are only a handful of strong warriors in the world who can contend with him. After the man finished fooling everyone from Jiandao sect, he went to the dungeon alone. The demon saw this, and gave a wicked grin. He mocked the man for being hypocritical. The eldest son knew very well that the disappearance of those thugs led to a decrease in the income coming in. Jode ordered his subordinates to take back those hotels, and train a few more cash cows. Only in this way could he expose the third brother's flaws. Please be mindful of yourself. The eldest son was filled with anger. Get him out of here. After my cousin left, my subordinates raised the issue of the recent funding shortages, because among the triplets' master, there were supporters of his. At that moment, his cousin walked in. He advised the eldest son to be more restrained, and Lord Tianlong has already learned about your connection to the demon god, and requested to see him. But what he was really thinking was how to get rid of the demon god. In Tianlong City, the young master was furious to learn that his son had been beaten, but he could only swallow his anger. He's imprisoned in the dungeon. This really scared the man. This guy is still not dead. If he tells the truth, it's over. So the man claimed it was for an investigation. Some even stepped forward to shake the man's hand in gratitude. but at that moment, the strategist revealed that the demon god wasn't dead, but we had severed his limbs. He portrayed the 36 warriors as fearless heroes of Han, who sacrificed their lives to keep the demon god from harming the children nearby. The demon god was slain. Upon hearing this, everyone was already in tears. He asked about the details of the battle with the demon god, since he was the one who had framed their expert, and he couldn't let them know that he had defeated the demon god. A tear slid down from the corner of his eye. The man began to act. Where exactly did the brothers learn their martial arts? It doesn't seem to be taught by their master, and they managed to injure a direct disciple of the Tang family like that. Should I go ask Grandpa? At this moment, the man is being targeted by the members of the Sword and Blade sect. It was their sister behind them who pointed out the problem. The brothers tried again after hearing her advice. They really didn't make another mistake, and their cooperation is becoming increasingly seamless. Meanwhile, the younger sister is confused. He couldn't help but burst into laughter. What kind of reward should he give these adorable guys? Meanwhile, the twins were practicing the martial arts technique they used last time, but kept running into obstacles. For a moment, they couldn't figure out why, causing the latter to grit her teeth in anger. Moreover, using the Tang family's reputation as a reason, it prevents the madam from rashly acting against the triplets. After saying this, she turns and leaves, back in the courtyard. Moreover, she intended to take this chance to humiliate him. Compared to the madam, Ying appears composed and calm. Although there isn't a single vulgar word in her speech, every word strikes directly at the madam's heart. Was furiously scolding her subordinates. At that moment, Ying walked in. Under the pretense of visiting her nephew's friend, she was actually here to help the triplets expand, mistook him for a benefactor, and invited the sect's divine healer to treat him. Watching as the healer was about to stick the long silver needle into his body, the blue man was so scared that he instantly recovered. Meanwhile, the elder son's wife, upon hearing her son was severely injured, even though he was wounded by the Vajra Demon King, he fully recovered overnight. But when he woke up, he found himself in the enemy camp. Helpless, he had to feign illness and stay bedridden. However, the Sword and Blade sect, they then reprimanded the three of them, saying that since they were fighting, they must win. They also shouldn't get hurt. His body was as strong as a rock, and his recovery speed was even more extraordinary than others. But adult fights are different. Just as the two were at a standoff, the guard behind him said that the young master's injuries were serious. After saying this, he hurriedly took him away. The Guangdong soldiers helped the older brother relocate his dislocated shoulder. He smiled and comforted the triplets' emotions, but then his expression darkened. The children are fighting, and the adults have to intervene. Then I can't just stand by and watch. He approached the brothers, ready to strike. Seeing this, the sister slowly stepped forward, powerful inner energy swirling around her. Suddenly, a hand pulled the sister back. The person who came was the Vietnamese army, and then, with a swift turn, he slammed the energy down to the ground. As the bald man coughed up a mouthful of blood, several figures instantly dropped from the beams. After checking the bald man's injuries, a guard's fury surged. Then, he suddenly hurled his older brother away, although the bald man quickly raised his hand to block the attack. At that moment, the older brother's internal energy was too overwhelming. He also appeared somewhat powerless. Seeing this, the older brother instinctively grabbed the bald man's collar. Seeing this, the younger brother hurried over to check on his brother's injuries. At this moment, the younger sister's expression also darkened. She pointed at her brothers, indicating that it wasn't over yet. The two brothers once again tightly grasped each other's hands. This time, the younger brother transferred all his internal energy into his older brother. In an instant, he twisted his wrist. The older brother gritted his teeth in pain and let go of his younger brother. Then he swung a powerful punch at the bald man's face. The latter winced in pain and was knocked to the ground. The older brother dislocated his shoulder as a result, but he blocked it with a raised hand. Before the bald man could react, the two switched positions again. The older brother's straight punch hit the bald man in the chest, but the latter caught him in response. The latter struggled to block. By the time he was ready to counterattack, the younger brother suddenly pulled the older brother back, then swiftly switched to attack. A straight punch aimed at the bald man. They charged towards the bald man. The difference this time is that their hands were tightly clasped together. The younger brother suddenly stopped at the limit of his distance. The older brother's legs surged towards the bald man like a fierce wind. Because of this, both of them were kicked away by the bald man. However, they couldn't be blamed. After all, it was their first time using it. The two immediately redirected their internal energy again. Inside the abandoned martial arts hall, the two brothers gathered their inner strength and charged at the bald man. But at a crucial moment, they lost their focus. Seeing this, the sister beside them angrily cursed her idiot brother. The next second, a flash of light filled his vision. The man on the bed woke up, accompanied by several bursts of light from his body. Blood gushed from his mouth. The wounds on his body began to heal rapidly. That's just a big hunk of meat. When the man turned his head again, the demon god had surprisingly turned into a charming figure. However, at this moment, his speed seemed as slow as a snail in the man's eyes. The man followed up with a punch. At this moment, the man is being scolded harshly by his master in a dream. "You idiot, even if you get beaten, you can't faint." The man pointed at the demon god. "That guy can take a beating better than I can," the master roared in response. The strong men of the Swordblade sect were still in a stalemate with us. So who exactly defeated the demon lord? Flying Dragon was silent. For some reason, a man's figure appeared in his mind. Many powerful beings gathered in that battle, yet in the end, they still couldn't kill him. And this time, the Golden Demon Lord, even the Sword King himself probably couldn't defeat him head-on. The 5 dragons were also puzzled. "Once I repay that favor, you can return it to me." With that, he turned and left. That night, the 3 dragons gathered around the bonfire. This incident made the dragon recall the battle with the Earth Demon God, all because the Sword and Saber sect was provoked, leading to war. Now, the Diamond Demon God has been captured. The war has come to an end. With a heavy heart, the Sword King trembles as he hands the treasured sword to Wulong. "I owe you all a favor. There's still a chance of winning." It seems to have heard the voice of its sister. The hands of the twins faintly radiate inner strength. They rush towards the bald man. The Sword King of a generation actually bestowed the treasured sword that had followed him for decades to another. His legs struck straight at the faces of the two. Seeing this scene, the younger sister also shook her head repeatedly. However, after all, she is the niece-in-law of the Tang family, and she is older than her brothers. If she can overcome the gap in internal strength, but their master was also very strong. With that, the two struck simultaneously. Their movements were surprisingly in sync, but he was easily caught by the bald man. He immediately leaped up. Thinking of this, he signaled his men to step aside. He wanted to take action personally. After speaking, he gestured for the two to make a move. The twins knew very well how strong this person was, because his martial arts were personally taught by Tianlong. Her lips move slightly, but no sound comes out. The bald man is a bit annoyed, because her lip movements clearly mock him, only daring to hide behind. "Just abide by the agreement." The two figures instantly turned ethereal, vanishes on the spot. Inside an abandoned martial arts hall, the sister approaches the bald man. "Come out," he said, but no one answered. He gently raised his right hand. A powerful aura instantly enveloped the entire forest. Two figures slowly appeared. "I have a message for your master." The subordinate still tried to argue, but the next second, a beast-like pressure swept over him. Seeing this, the subordinate dared not act anymore. In an instant, he disappeared from the spot. The homeowner immediately turned to look at the jungle. The housemaster landed on the ground like a falling leaf. His subordinate followed closely behind, and knelt in front of the master, begging for mercy. But the master did not take his life, only stripped him of his position. So, the elite force of the 5th house was dispatched to eliminate them. However, the subordinates were unwilling to give up. They had been preparing for this operation for 5 years. This enraged the housemaster. His overwhelming aura caused the treetops to snap. Meanwhile, on a nearby treetop, the master of the assassination room was watching this scene. It turned out that these madmen were the materials they sent to instigate the war. The Vajra demon was prepared as a backup plan to destroy the sword sect, but now they've strayed from their original purpose, bringing disaster to the people. Just then, a pair of people wearing metal masks surged into the battlefield. They struck swiftly with their blades. In an instant, they annihilated all those madmen. Then they hurriedly left. After Jinzuan fell to the ground, he never got up again. Meanwhile, the man's consciousness gradually faded as he struggled. On the battlefield, Jiandaman and Tianlongman had formed a temporary alliance against these madmen. But even so, everyone still appeared somewhat battered. It seemed he was celebrating his victory. Suddenly, a long stick came at the back of his head. Jinzuan turned around in pain, and punched him straight in the face. It seems that the blow with the staff had an effect, but the next second, Jinzun instantly appeared in front of him. Then he took care of the remaining 2 swordsmen. After doing all this, Jinzun laughed maniacally. This sudden turn of events left the swordsman a bit stunned. And the one who intervened was a man, because if the golden figure died now, he would surely be killed by the remaining swordsmen. The swordsman cursed at the man. The protective energy around him was completely gone. The 3 swordsmen also noticed this. They immediately teamed up to prepare to kill him. Just as the long sword was about to touch the golden figure, it was suddenly deflected by a long staff. Jinzuan retreated step by step, but each time he was injured, he would take a swordsman down with him. In just a few moments, only 3 swordsmen were left standing, and at this point, Jinzuan was at the end of his strength. If he let this guy survive, he himself would be in danger. Seeing the man make a move, 36 Hands was also puzzled. but still decided to seize this opportunity. So with the cooperation of several people. But at this moment, after countless battles, big and small, his momentum had waned. Yet even so, he was still invincible against several masters. At this moment, the man finally decided to act. But upon hearing this, Xiao He said not to worry. He is very strong, but even so, there was still a hint of worry in Tian Miao's eyes. He has practiced body techniques to perfection. His body is as hard as steel. Moments later, a figure appears in front of him. It's too dangerous here. The young lady has ordered me to take you back as soon as possible. Tian Miao pondered for a moment upon hearing this. Then, blushing, she asked Xiao Haizi to help bring someone back. The disappearance of the double gates in Wuxue is also related to my grandfather. I can't just sit by and watch. Meanwhile, the warriors heading to the battlefield are currently resting and regrouping. Tian Miao is mixed in among them. He quietly walks into the dense forest. Now the diamond demon god has emerged. This news left Tian Susu feeling conflicted. But he also knew that person wouldn't let such a thing happen. Though he is cunning. But I also don't want to cause harm to the people. Inside the demon sect's hall, a devotee found Tian Susu, and the 5 gates began to take action. They orchestrated the conflict between the Sword Blade sect and the Heavenly Dragon sect. Because of the disappearance of the 5 blood double gates, the Gold Gate and Water Gate no longer had the strength to control the demon god. They even had enough strength to counterattack. And behind them, 3 named conspirators were watching the scene with satisfaction. At that moment, the younger sister appeared beside them. What came into view was a row of dancers from the Tianlong martial arts school. It seemed that a sense of determination had also appeared in the brothers' eyes. The few quickly got entangled in a fight. Although the twins were surrounded by many people, they were not injured at all. The brother held his sister's hand upon hearing this. If that's the case, I will never let him go. After saying this, he led the 2 upstairs to search for him, until the light slowly emerged. This unexpected scene startled the younger sister, causing her to stumble. Fortunately, her younger brother behind her caught her in time. After taking a punch from her brother, the figure turned and ran away. Once she regained her composure, the younger sister realized this was a trick by the Qianlong society. And at this moment, the man's eyes had a distinct glint of bloodlust. Inside the abandoned martial arts hall, the triplets followed the hallway until they reached a staircase. Just as they were about to go upstairs, a white figure suddenly appeared. Meanwhile, Toad was just talking to his subordinates about the man. Toad's assessment of him was that he was a saint to his own people, but if it was his enemy, he was a demon. Especially when his eyes gleamed with bloodlust, everyone realized he had weakened. In agony, Jinzuan picked up the sword. He swung it at a warrior, but at that very moment, the man's figure stood in front of him. But whichever side wins, none of this benefits the man. He has to make a decision quickly. At that moment, Jinzuan was struck by a sword. He began his counterattack. At this moment, every move he made seemed so clear in the man's eyes. This was clearly the latter half of the dense technique. The 36 techniques were being beaten back step by the golden cup. Jinzun made no effort to dodge, but as the sword pierced his skin, his scream was thunderous, shaking the air. But it was only a matter of moments. He then shook off the long sword. He stomped his right foot forcefully on the ground. A powerful wave of energy swept over. Everyone's swords shattered one by one. Just as Jinzun was about to counterattack, a sword infused with immense inner strength suddenly stabbed toward him. The others raised their swords and charged at Jinzun to buy him time. The latter took on a strange stance upon seeing this. In the next moment, a powerful protective energy filled his muscles. Behind him, the figure of a demon god fatally appeared. But today, he saw the manual's content again. At this moment, Jinzun's battle has reached its climax, and reinforcements from the 36th Division have arrived. Seeing this, Wei Shou's wife infused her inner strength into the longsword. This is a martial arts manual with only half of it. The other half was ruined by a child's urine. The man racked his brain, but couldn't recall the content of the second half. He thought the technique was lost forever, because the sister was too scared. The 2 brothers had her walk in the middle. They continued to explore. Meanwhile, Shenlong Hui on the beam is also quietly watching this scene. The 2 brothers were displeased at being mocked as cowards. He came here looking for a wooden sword, but his sister followed because she was worried. So she came along. The 3 of them walked through the dark hallway, seemed to have surpassed the limits of humanity. This sudden turn of events made both sides, who were locked in fierce combat, unanimously switch their targets. Meanwhile, the triplets still showed up at the abandoned martial arts hall as promised. They attacked indiscriminately, without distinguishing friend from foe. Even when struck by sharp swords, the smiles on their faces never faded. An immense power. Even men were captivated by the sight. Isn't this the intense second half? How could this guy? On the battlefield, the Sword Sect and the Heavenly Dragon Sect were fiercely clashing. Suddenly, a group of riders charged out of the forest. The moment he lands, he uses his hands to push off the ground. Then, his legs spin his whole body violently. A powerful vortex sweeps through several people like a storm. And this scene, just at that moment, one person had already approached him from behind with a raised sword. But in the next second, he channels Cristiano Ronaldo and kicks away the sword with a bicycle kick. They immediately lunged forward with their swords. However, Jin Zun appeared to be completely at ease. Even under the siege of several people, not only did he not fall behind, but he was also able to seize the opportunity to counterattack. Naren immediately pointed his sword at Jin Zun again, asking about the child's whereabouts. The latter laughed out loud upon hearing this. You guys are the strongest unit of Jiandao sect, the 36 hands? I think you're just a bunch of people with no real strength. Upon hearing this, the crowd stopped wasting words with him, but was falsely accused by Jin Zun. This made a few people think the man and Jin Zun were in cahoots. The man, left with no choice, had to raise both hands and sit on the ground. But this also made the man even more dissatisfied with Jin Zun. The man beside him couldn't help but ask, could it be that Jin Zun has kidnapped the children of the Sword and Blade sect? Is that why they have chased into the territory of the Heavenly Dragon sect? However, the most important thing now is to escape with the children. Thinking of this, the man planned to sneak away. At this moment, several shadows rushed over swiftly. In an instant, they surrounded the two completely, only to see the newcomer pointing his sword at Jin Zun, inquiring about the whereabouts of the children. He still half-heartedly chatted with the burly man. Can we really do it? The burly man pointed to himself upon hearing this. The golden goblet has appeared. What can't we do? The big man slowly said, from now on, follow me. Let's take them down. Create a world of our own. This sudden invitation left the man a bit stunned, but to buy time for the kids to escape, the man crossed his arms in front of his chest to guard. Then, he suddenly lunged, knocking the long staff out of the big man's hands. Launch a fierce attack, but was pushed away by the big man. When the man stood up, raising the two sticks in his hands, he struck at the big man behind him, but they were swiftly grabbed. With a giant swing, he was thrown out. Before the man could regain his footing, the big man was already upon him again. The big man chased closely behind. Not long after, the man fled all the way to the foot of the mountain, but he ran right into the kids who were also coming down the mountain. With no other options left, he leaped backward. Make sure to run away immediately. Thinking of this, the man glanced behind him. With no other choice, Xiaofeng had to take a gamble. After saying that, he sped off in the opposite direction. Sure enough, he bet correctly, yet he kept laughing maniacally. He kept repeating more over and over. This bizarre scene reminded the man of what his master once said, if one day you encounter someone who enjoys being beaten, everyone is extremely troubled. A young man suggests luring the triplets to the now unused martial arts hall. Everyone immediately agrees. Then he stood up and approached the triplets. The big man was beaten beyond recognition by the man. It seemed to remind the man of something. Inside the Qianlong martial arts school, 3 people who were once rejected by the Qianlong society after inviting the triplets to join, are now taking advantage of the master's absence. They are discussing how to use this opportunity to get revenge on the triplets. What awaited him was a flurry of fists. When the two finally separated again, the big man was already unrecognizable, yet his smile grew even more arrogant. This bizarre scene unfolded. The latter still made a funny face. Next, to the internet, he suddenly grabbed the man's collar. With the same move, he struck back at the man, but the latter blocked it with his hand. The latter hurriedly raised his hands to block the giant. Then, taking advantage of the momentum, he threw him back. Immediately, he grabbed his collar again. With his elbow leading, he fiercely slammed down on the giant. Unexpectedly, after taking such a powerful hit, they only parted when both were bloodied and bruised. Both of them questioned each other's identity in their hearts. Suddenly, the man was distracted by a breeze nearby. The strong man seized the opportunity. Suddenly, he pushed off forcefully towards the man. But the next second, the man suddenly grabbed him by the collar, immediately followed by a headbutt. This time, the two did not separate. Instead, they stood their ground like two bulls. The strong impact separated them. The man was a bit frustrated. His proud body had failed to overpower him. Seeing this, the big guy's smile grew wider. Meanwhile, the man had already moved behind the big man, but the big man caught the approaching staff with his hand, and then, with a sudden force, pulled the man in front of him. Suddenly, right above them, the two collided forcefully, face to face. At the critical moment, the hidden member of the Thunder Dragon squad raised his sword to strike the big man, but the latter merely raised his hand and broke the long sword. What followed was a straight punch. The squad member hurriedly raised his hands, crossing them to shield his face the next second. The big man surprisingly raised his hand to catch this deadly blow unharmed. The man looked a bit stunned. The big man brushed aside the stick in his hand. A smile also appeared on his face. He then charged fiercely toward the little phone beside him. With that, he lightly taps the ground. Then he suddenly raises his dual sticks and charges at the burly man. Double slash. A strong impact momentarily caused a crackling sound in the air. But in the next second, with just a few turns, he lands safely. He knows he can't escape the fight, so he loosens his steps. He lets the little wind go. He instructs it to stay put and wait. But the big man slowly walked toward where the children were hiding. Seeing this, the man hurriedly raised his hand to stop him, but the big man spun and threw him into the air. Fortunately, the man's agility is impressive. Just as the man was puzzled, the big man slowly spoke, "Step aside. I'm not your enemy." The man didn't want to get tangled with him. He quickly stepped aside to let him pass. He hurriedly raised the long stick in his hand and swung it at him, but surprisingly, he stopped just at the limit of its range, dodging the fatal blow. The man was somewhat shocked, but he still kicked him several meters away. The man nodded vigorously, but the next second, the big man sprang into action. He charged toward the man. The latter, seeing this, felt a moment of panic. The big man saw this, and responded with a wise smile to the man, as if he understood what the man meant. He pointed behind him. "Are you telling me to go somewhere else?" He then tied the little wind behind him with a piece of cloth. Soon after, a strong man approached. The man couldn't tell at that moment if this person was friend or foe. He could only signal with his expression for him not to come this way. This seemingly dull-witted big man was unexpectedly a top-notch expert. As the man led the children down the mountain, the sounds of battle echoed ahead. The man immediately ordered his subordinates to hide the children in the jungle. After saying this, he took them down the mountain. However, because the children were too young, they didn't make it very far by nightfall. The man knew that with this kind of pursuit, they wouldn't escape for 3 or 4 days. He had to think of another way. After saying this, he brought the man to their position. The man also saw Xiaofeng's figure among them. After confirming the number of children, the man took out his token. "It means that I will now lead myself," only to realize it was someone from Tianlong sect. He immediately took out his token and inquired about the children's whereabouts. Seeing this, the man hurriedly clasped his hands in greeting. He stated that he belonged to the Thunder team, and that he had already protected the children. The man didn't notice anything, though, so he carried the boy on his back and continued walking. Just at that moment, a figure sprang out of the jungle. The man hurriedly raised his staff to strike back. In the end, the boy couldn't hold on and closed his eyes. The man suppressed the anger in his heart, and knocked the boy behind him unconscious. He then picked him up, ready to leave. But suddenly, there was a sound from the jungle. He hurriedly stepped forward to check, only to find that he was barely hanging on. This also caught the attention of the boy behind him. He slowly removed his blindfold, and witnessed this cruel scene. The man was furious. His aura surged instantly. He covered the boy's eyes. Then he went to check if any of the children on the ground were Xiaofeng. Suddenly, a panting sound caught the man's attention. He only remembered coming down from above. The man listened intently. He immediately carried the boy on his back and ran to the top of the mountain. But when he arrived, he saw a shocking scene. The man followed the sound. He found a deaf boy with no guardians. He cautiously approached the boy. He asked about the whereabouts of the other children. At that moment, the boy was too frightened to remember where he had escaped from. But when he arrived here, he found that even the rear had become a battlefield. Even the retreat route was hard to find. Just when he was troubled about how to find the child, a sound of crying came from the forest. Because he knew well that the man was a sharp blade, but if he doesn't let him be a little bit, it might backfire instead. So, after understanding the situation, the man went to the battlefield. This also caused the man's dissatisfaction. After a moment of contemplation, Lord Long took out a token. He entrusted him with the command of that area, and ordered him to rescue the children, because if we don't, other forces will surely take advantage of the situation. But the man seems uninterested in this matter. He anxiously inquired about the whereabouts of the children from the Shuanglong martial arts school, but Lord Long stated that there were other matters to attend to. The latter told the man. At first, both sides only engaged in small-scale conflicts, but slowly, skilled fighters from the area got involved. In the end, it turned into what it is now. We must prevent the war from happening. Because of this, the two sides nearly erupted into full-scale combat. The man was also appointed as the captain of the warrior team to head to the battlefield. At the moment of execution, he found Lord Long, but after the man left, the wet nurse eventually collapsed to the ground. They are the strongest force of the Sword and Saber sect. With only 36 members, they have the strength of a 1,000-man team, yet they have appeared within the territory of the Heavenly Dragon sect. Seeing the man's urgency, the wet nurse also seemed to sense that something was wrong and anxiously asked him what was happening, but the man didn't tell her. He only said that he would definitely bring her back safely. But at that moment, The man seemed to remember something. He hurried back home and searched for the wet nurse. Xiaofeng has gone to the martial arts school in Qingtian County, but when the man opened it to take a look, the content above. Every word strikes with horror. War has broken out in Xingtian County. Everyone must leave within the hour. Someone approached the man holding a command. Start immediately. You are the captain of the warriors. Confirm the order and execute it immediately. After saying this, he turned and left. He had been here for 10 years, and had only heard it go off once. That was when a child had been kidnapped. A large number of warriors quickly gathered in the city. At that moment, the next day, the man brought Frog to the Sunset Red Gym. He told Frog that from now on, it was his responsibility to train the warriors. But just as everyone was talking, a sudden urgent alarm sounded. The man was a bit stunned. He ordered his subordinates to scatter and flee. They were to bring the intelligence back to Tianlong City. But just a few moments later, he fell in a pool of blood. In the dark forest, only the sound of pursuit remained, and simply entrusted Yuejun to handle the matter fully. In a dense forest, the dragon squad was ambushed by a group of mysterious individuals. The captain knew that he could not escape death this time, so he stood in front to protect his men. After some small talk, Yuejun revealed the next plan. That is to continue putting the person above on the list. But the cash flow is quite significant. The man had no objections. That person is terrifying. And it's not just him there. There are also people who would frighten you. Better to wait for the right opportunity. The man at this moment also brought Yuejun to meet with the toad. He too seemed quite intrigued. It's not a bad idea to move around a little now. It wouldn't hurt. The two elders were overjoyed when they heard this. But then he said, happiness is right. Became even more enraged. They immediately declared they would go take his head. And the commotion among the three caught the attention of the homeowner. After learning what had happened, upon hearing this, the boy revealed a hint of a smile. Tianlong is indeed one of the martial supremes. As the grandfather of the 7 demons, can we defeat them? The two elders, seeing this, the twin demons are pacing back and forth around the boy, because he promised to help the twin demons bring back the twins. But he has yet to take action. This has really angered the two elders. They immediately declared they would go to Tianlong City and cause a ruckus. Apart from greed, there was nothing worth mentioning. Tianlong also heard about the recent commotion in the city, but only sent the person behind him to inquire. At the Li family estate. However, deep down, he blamed his father, old Hudong. If only he had clearly named the third son as the heir. But it shouldn't have come to this. In Tianlong's eyes, they were all just a bunch of useless people with family lineage. He seemed intent on handling it himself. The next day, news of the two missing reached the eldest son. His men suspected it was the third son's doing, but he didn't pay much attention. He merely left it to his men to handle. His heart was filled with mixed feelings. At that moment, the Yu army appeared behind the man, and offered to handle the aftermath. But the man refused. They agreed to split it 50-50. The two were captivated by the beauty as soon as they entered the restaurant. By the time they were thoroughly drunk, a man's figure appeared before them. Looking at the two collapsed on the ground. The man had been framed and nearly lost his life. He barely survived. So, the first thing he did after returning to Tianlong City was to eliminate the two officials who had framed him. At that moment, the two were smugly heading to Wanren Tower for a night of indulgence. They had negotiated with the Yu army for the underground fortune. He will deal with these matters in the streets. Resolving this might cause a bit of unrest. Hopefully, by then, the deputy shopkeeper will act as if he knows nothing. Wen Yen remained silent for a long time. But eventually, he agreed to the man's request. This can't help but surprise the heavens. You actually thought that far ahead. But the man doesn't want to handle this publicly, because that would affect the warriors. But he won't just let it go. It was filled with evidence of crimes committed by the underlings of the eldest son of Tianlong Palace. The man initially wanted to seek Lord Long's help, but he is a supporter of the eldest son. That's why he sought out Tian Rishang, because Tian Rishang's junior sister, Yingying, is the wife of the third son. But this also raised doubts in the younger sister. She had to go ask Grandpa, is this really useful? A few days later, the man found Tian Rishang under the cover of night. He handed him a list. They saw Yuejun slowly walking out from inside. Hello everyone, I am the new manager of Wanren Building, Yuejun. On the other side, the twins knew their father didn't want to hurt them. So, they beat each other every day. Because they wanted to be as strong as their father. At this moment, the leader of the Ammonite sect was on his way to the 10,000-man tower. He had eliminated those troublesome warriors. He was preparing to cultivate some money trees. But when he arrived here, what they saw was a shocking scene. It seems he has made a decision. He sent the toad to the 10,000-man tower to seek a living with the Vietnamese army. But this also caused the toad's dissatisfaction. Clearly, they were once good friends. Why did he only call the Vietnamese army and not himself? The toad reproaches the man for having abandoned his brother and leaving without a word. The man, however, expresses that he has his own difficulties. Seeing this, the toad no longer says much. He only tells the man about the mastermind, Master Mo Dao. Upon hearing this, the man contemplates for a moment. He finally recognized that this was his former elder brother. The fighting also ceased amidst their conversation. The man brought Toad outside the village. The two of them drink from the same jar of wine, yet live different lives. It turns out to be the technique used by my former rogue teammate, Toad. The man forcefully kneed him apart. The two immediately shouted, "Toad!" Toad was taken aback upon hearing this. At this moment, under the moonlight, the leader was already motionless. But in the next second, his body suddenly shot up. The man hurriedly raised his hand to block him. From the leader's move, he sensed something was off. The man was puzzled that a mere bandit knew martial arts. The latter was amazed that a mere samurai had such skill. Thinking of this, his head suddenly slammed into the man. Unexpectedly, it was caught by the flag-bearer. The man pressed down with force. Then, at his command, the battle erupted instantly. The man and the leader clashed. After testing each other, both were shocked. The wanderers in the deep forest began putting on their masks. But when they arrived at the stronghold, what they saw were the warriors who had long been waiting. Yet the leader didn't seem surprised at all. "I just thought it was interesting." The elder, in gratitude to the warriors, they brought out fine wine to entertain. Everyone got into the mood, drinking and chatting. Little did they know the old man had already consumed the poison in the wine. As the noise gradually died down, until night fell, they finally arrived outside the stronghold. At the man's command, they launched a surprise attack on the stronghold. In no time, they had bound these bandits tightly. Though the old man spoke at length, the man still sensed something unusual, but he didn't bring it up. They simply followed them into the deep mountains. The group walked for a long time, simply because he didn't want to live as a wandering ronin anymore. He was hired at a high price to eliminate a few samurai, and now the man had arrived at the rendezvous point for support. After some polite conversation, the man asked about the bandits. He is a wandering drifter of the Jianghu, yet now he occupies the village, disguising himself as a bandit. Though he has kidnapped the villagers, he has not harmed them in the slightest. The reason he does this, the man saw the opportunity and spoke again, saying, "We don't need to just play at being human. If you want to withdraw, I won't stop you." The heavy warrior no longer speaks much at this moment, but he no longer harbors his previous discontent. Xiao Zhang stepped forward. He fought against the man for several rounds with his strong will. Even though he was covered in wounds, he never gave up. Because of this, he earned the right to eat meat. But many people want to eat. Only the most eager ones will get to eat. With an attitude like yours, can you get any meat? At that moment, the warrior was filled with anger. He immediately tried to attack the man, but was kicked to the ground. The man picked up the skewer and started eating in front of everyone. When there's not much meat, one of the warriors saw this, and reached out to grab it, but he was stopped by the man. He tried again multiple times, but it was all in vain, complaining about the U Army's recent brutal training, but the man's expression darkened. "So you want to become stronger?" After saying that, he pointed at the roasted meat. "Do you want to eat this?" He ordered him to leave. At that moment, the man had already led the warriors to carry out the mission. But the U Army did not go with them. This made the warriors dissatisfied. They immediately confronted the man. They told him they soaked in medicinal baths their father prepared every day. But when the sect leader found out, he said it was impossible. If medicinal baths could strengthen their constitution, our Hanyuan sect would have started using them long ago. So after giving Tian Rishang a few instructions, but what confuses him is that this aura is extraordinarily powerful. The children's bodies shouldn't be able to withstand it. Tian Rishang felt a tremor in his heart. He remembered when he used to train the children. The master told Tian Rishang that he indeed discovered other auras within the boy's body, but they did not belong to the 5 Dragon Temple's techniques. However, they were very compatible with the Hanyuan techniques. It seems he needs to investigate other sects within the association. That he, who should dislike children, is unusually interested in the twins. After the two reminisced, he turned and left. Afterward, Tian Rishang found the master of the Hanyuan pavilion. "Even I am very curious about what he will do." In the Hanyuan sect, Tianri came here with the twins to inquire about internal skills. However, he encountered his junior sister Engying here. What's strange is, he also learned about this from his junior disciple. The difference is, Filong actually laughed heartily upon hearing the news. He is a master. You don't have to worry about him. He couldn't interfere. He knew this was the handiwork of the young master, but he also understood that the man could handle it himself. So he instructed his subordinates not to interfere in this matter. At this moment, Filong is making the kids a sword with a broken finger. After seeing the man's gaze, he still agreed. but he also stated that he would train those weak warriors. At this moment, Lord Long also learned this news from his subordinates. However, since it was a direct order from the Heavenly Dragon Palace, everyone has equal status. But men are unwilling to do such things anymore. After a moment of contemplation, he suggested that after reclaiming the gang association, the U Army should manage it. The U Army feels somewhat helpless, but this also puzzled the U Army. The man who once led a group of Ronin, why has it become so weak now? He criticizes the organization that men have established today. There isn't even a command system. At the same time, there was a hint of surprise on his face. He could achieve the 5 elements void so easily. After the man received the mission to go to Yunnan, he sought out the U Army to discuss a strategy, because he was afraid the warriors might get hurt. Seeing this, the old man explained that it was just practice. If real danger were to come, and he only tried to use it then, it would be too late. After saying that, he gave Shu Xian a cookie. When Shu Xian opens his eyes again, yet he looked troubled. He asked his grandfather why he had to do this. Although it was simple, he always felt a tightness in his chest afterward. He values Shu Xian's intelligence and talent. Every day, he brings him to practice. Today is no exception. He makes Shu Xian lie flat on the ground, and guides him to block the martial sensations one by one. The man took it and opened it. It clearly listed the names of the warriors he had gathered. He is the sweeper of the Heavenly Dragon Gate. He often boasts about having once unified the martial arts world. He also has a magnificent estate. His actions have already disturbed some people's interests. So the next day, he received a mission. He was to go to distant Yunnan to eliminate some bandits. He was given a list of personnel who would accompany him on the mission. Thinking of this, I hurriedly spoke up. Once a man's weaknesses increase, he will become weaker and weaker, but a man does not know. This made the U Army question in their hearts. Is this still the big brother I once knew? You were ruthless during your wandering years. Why have you become so soft-hearted now? And it seems you are even running an orphanage. And slightly nodded her head. On the other side, the man shared his thoughts with the U Army. He wanted to take control of the Gangsters Association, and replace them with Tianlong Society's warriors. He could even provide jobs for those unemployed. The scene amazed the crowd below the stage. Then, Shu Xian brought Xiaofeng back to the table, telling him that everyone is family. And afterward, they trained together with the brothers. Xiaofeng heard this, and sent him flying. Before he even landed. With just a few swift moves, it was all over. The other 3 only heard a thud, as 4 figures landed simultaneously. Seeing this, everyone immediately surrounded Shu Xian. Then they rushed at her, but Shu Xian easily dodged with a few quick moves. She then used a secret technique from her sect, which Zhao had used before. He simply couldn't stand their bullying. Shu Xian recognized that Zhao's technique came from Dipeng Pai. He immediately used his identity as Dian Yang's disciple to apply pressure, but the opponents still spoke arrogantly. This made Shu Xian decide not to show mercy anymore. Just as they were about to make a move, several punches landed on their faces. Everyone was utterly confused. Shu Xian's figure slowly appeared. It turned out he had already arrived. Seeing this, Zhao became furious. His fists rained down on Xiaofeng like a storm. But unexpectedly, Xiaofeng could take the hits. He seized the opportunity and punched Zhao in the stomach. The crowd below saw this and rushed forward. Xiaofeng's pent-up frustration erupted in an instant. He swung his fists and charged at the crowd, but he dodged it with a swift move, then used his school's ultimate technique to throw him away. Xiaofeng staggered to his feet and walked towards Zhao. This made Shu Xian feel very strange. The next day, while Xiaofeng was having lunch at the martial arts school, he was humiliated by several young rascals. The one in charge even offered to help him train. After saying that, he took him to the training ground. But he had no answer at this moment. He only asked him to come back to find him in half a month. That day, the wet nurse's son, Xiaofeng, came to the man's house for dinner after a long time. Just as the older brothers expressed their desire to go to the Shuanglong martial arts school to play with Xiaofeng, he seemed exceptionally resistant. Tianri sat slowly in front of an elder, but he did not disturb the old man. He waited until the old man slowly set down the book in his hands. Then he told the old man about the twins' internal power. The old man was a bit surprised upon hearing this. They possess the most scholarly knowledge of martial patterns in all of the martial world. Though they do not practice martial arts, their theoretical understanding far surpasses even the strongest fighters. Even the most powerful martial arts have their flaws. But after their revisions, those flaws can be corrected. The man told Xiao Zhang, "Don't be fooled by the Cantonese army. He is a person who is very trustworthy." Xiao Zhang seemed to have found peace after hearing this. Within the Han Yuan sect. But the Cantonese army smiled when they saw this. After receiving the man's affirmation, he opened his arms and got on the horse. The result was obvious. The warriors were completely subdued. The U army kept shaking their heads, and they told the man if he wants to control the gangs here, Relying on these people is impossible. But those words also displeased the warriors. They immediately wanted to teach the stranger a lesson. The smartest one in the group of wanderers. This time, the man called her over. It's just to help him deal with that confusion. This is the Sunset Red Sword Gym. Just a 30-kilogram bench press has left the warrior utterly exhausted. Someone called out to her from behind. The man looked very happy upon seeing her. After a brief exchange of pleasantries, the man brought her back to his home. She was a teammate from the man's wandering days. The two had a wonderful time together, and soon it was time to part. Manhwa seemed a bit reluctant, and said she would arrange their next meeting through Tian Miao. Just as the man was lost in thought, a woman of extraordinary beauty slowly walked up to the man, politely greeted her, and introduced herself as Manhua. After that, she left with the man. The scene left everyone present in shock. Seeing this, the man stepped forward to greet her, only to be met with disdain. He was further humiliated by her and her boyfriend, who arrived late. This left the man speechless. At that moment, both died with hatred. On the Tongfeng Bridge, the man ultimately broke his promise to Tian Miao. Arriving here, a figure appeared in front of her in a flash of thought. Inside, they were shocked to find their junior brother's head. The two were enraged on the spot, swords drawn, ready to strike. But in the next second, a thin wire slashed across their throats. He just instructs his junior to keep a low profile. But at that moment, a figure suddenly appears behind them. He holds out a box in front of the two. When they open it, but also had powerful martial artists stationed there. These words seem to remind the man of something. The leader of the three-kill sect is currently discussing recent events involving the masked figure with his junior. He also doesn't seem to want things to escalate. Rather than this, it would be better to first build up strong physical abilities. One day, while the man was dealing with some thugs, he learned about a place called the Three-Kill Sect. It was not only the largest gang in the area, but he also mentioned that the warriors want to train with you. The man didn't refuse. But how could this be learned in just one move? After a few rounds with the man, the warriors couldn't keep up. The man realized this wouldn't work. Meanwhile, the man had almost dealt with all the thugs in the city over the past few days. He told Xiao Zhang, the next step is to control them. He knows someone perfect for this task. Xiao Zhang had no objections. They were channeling their energy into the guns. This meant they had already mastered the inner technique. Who could it be? Could it be Feilong and Dianyang? I must investigate this myself. And Shuxian trusted him completely. The elder patted Shuxian's head in approval. This child is truly too clever. The twins went to Tianri to learn marksmanship. But Tianri noticed something unusual during their practice. But it was only for a moment. He immediately dismissed the idea. Later, Shuxian sought out the old man again to learn how to sweep. Now she could sweep with afterimages just like the elder. Grandfather told Shuxian that she didn't need to learn what the other masters taught. He recalled his duel with the man. That battle had once put him in a tough spot. Though his moves were quite clumsy, they were nothing compared to the man's overwhelming physical techniques. Suddenly, it seemed he thought of that person. As a woman, she trained herself to become a powerful martial artist. She has a unique understanding of swordsmanship. Now, he has taken the three children as disciples. He recognized the strong fighting spirit in them, just like their father. But Tianmio was relentless. He left a message saying that next time you're off, he'll be waiting for you at Ventilation Bridge. After saying that, he hurriedly turned and left. He's one of the dragon dancers, known as Feilong. Tian Miao said he had a girl he wanted to introduce to him. The man was very pleased to hear this. But when he heard the girl was only 20, the man refused her. I still have a conscience. He said this was the bonus from the last mission. I'll share half of the gift with you. This made Tian Miao feel delighted. He immediately used the money to take the man to a tavern. After several rounds of drinks, the next day, Tian Miao arrived at the man's house. By coincidence, she caught the man changing clothes. Her face turned slightly red. However, the man didn't seem to care. He simply took out a bag of silver coins. But without evidence, he sparked their displeasure. To prevent things from escalating, and drawing attention from the higher-ups, the captain could only give up at this point. But this also reminded everyone to proceed with caution next. Whenever it was daytime, there would be scenes of gang members stripped and kneeling in the street, confessing. But this infuriated the new captain, because he was their protector. He angrily scolded the samurai for their misconduct. At night, they wear black silk masks. They sweep through various gangs. Wherever they go, they act swiftly, leaving no trace behind. A figure slowly ran out from inside. Behind him came the sound of his father's scolding. The girl's face is filled with worry. It seems she is troubled by something. Soon after, the man finds several like-minded warriors to form a team. It seems this guy's intelligence ultimately has to rely on himself. So he said he would introduce a partner to the man. Having said that, he turned and left. Meanwhile, the man stared out the window, lost in thought. A grand mansion. This was a woman's intuition. So when the man returned home, the wet nurse intentionally and unintentionally tested him, but the man seemed to genuinely treat him as a handsome guy. This left the wet nurse speechless. At the moment their hands made contact, he actually emitted a strong blow. The next day, Tian Miao brought gifts to the house again. The family seemed to have adapted to the presence of this handsome guy. However, the wet nurse noticed something was off. The younger brother suggested practicing the technique their grandfather taught them. The two immediately agreed. They immediately started. The twins slowly raised their hands. A powerful gravitational force began to pull them together. He would find a few like-minded samurai within the group, then find a proxy to manage things. This way, it wouldn't attract attention from the higher-ups. The twins are currently practicing in the courtyard. They seem to be feeling a bit bored, but he also knew this wouldn't solve the problem. These thugs' vitality is like weeds. If not dealt with, they will come back again. So the man made a decision. He wanted to get rid of these thugs once and for all. He had the captain, who was helping the colleague, dismissed. This made the man unable to bear it any longer. He immediately put on a mask. He gave them a severe beating. Then, he tied them up and made them apologize to his colleague. Was now kneeling neatly with his subordinates in front of the man. It was simply because they had harmed the people in the city. Evil-doing is rampant. He even bullied a colleague's girlfriend. Moreover, he secretly colluded with the knife gang. The captain was informed that he would be on leave for a few days. At the time of parting, the captain told the man he would stay behind. You don't need to do anything. This burly man, who had been arrogant just a second ago, seeing this, the scholar was even angrier. This matter won't just end like this. The captain ignored him. He just left with a few people. But the next day, he suddenly jumped up and threw a punch. It hit the big guy on the forehead. You're not wrong. I didn't raise my warriors well. They were actually bullied by a thug. Just when the captain was at a loss, he noticed little Zhang on the ground. He immediately approached to ask. After learning what had happened, the captain's anger surged. He just told him to go find the captain to discuss it. At that moment, the captain appeared behind everyone. The leader saw this, and immediately angrily scolded the captain for not properly educating his warriors. It is Red Hair's father, Master Mo Dao. He doesn't distinguish right from wrong. He immediately started yelling at the man. The man knew very well that this guy was definitely the umbrella for these thugs, so he ignored him. The man's fist came right to his face. Soon, only the dagger remained. That burly man, but just then, a figure appeared behind them. Just as the big guy was about to order his execution, the figure of a man appeared behind the crowd. It seems I'll have to drink more of your wine today. The anonymous thug burst into insults, but in the next second, he threw away the flowers and started fighting with a group of thugs. But in the end, two fists couldn't match many hands. He was no match for the thugs, and fell to the ground, his heart filled with anger and unwillingness. On the other side, the man's colleague, Xiao Zhang, appeared particularly happy today. He even invited the man to have a drink together tonight. As night fell, Xiao Zhang arrived at his girlfriend's place with flowers. However, he saw that his girlfriend was being bullied by several thugs. Xiao Zhang immediately flew into a rage. As soon as they met, the battle of sharp words began. The father expressed his dissatisfaction with the boy's presumptuousness. Meanwhile, the boy defended his position vehemently. In the end, he was unwilling to argue further with the boy. He simply turned away after showing concern for his eyes. Although it was merely a facade, he had finally mastered inner strength. In the Li family manner, the boy returned home with the twin demons of heaven and earth, and standing outside, hands behind his back, was his father. At night, the man stood in the moonlight, radiating a faint orchid fragrance. With a sudden swing of his fist, the meridians on his body emitted light. He took a deep breath. He brought a moving toy box for his brothers. He brought a glowing ring for his sister. He even brought gifts for the nurse. Looking at the happy crowd, he secretly thought that he should start winning over his family. How could a young man be so handsome? While they were talking, the children returned from school. Seeing this, Tian Miao took out the gifts she had prepared. He began his training. On that day, a special guest arrived at the man's home. As soon as he entered, he politely greeted the wet nurse. He introduced himself as the man's childhood friend. The wet nurse blushed at the sight. Years later, the man once again recalled his master's words. He wanted to become stronger, to protect the child, so he immersed himself in the medicinal cauldron. This man shows off his muscles every day, but he was only lightly touched by his master, and he rolled on the ground in pain. His master told him, "Wait until you can breathe with your body before coming out to make tea." He imposed a gag order on the cult, but the man did not believe what the old man said. The old man immediately reprimanded him, "If you're worried about becoming stronger, why not just do it?" The man fell into deep thought. The old man's words seemed to have awakened him. He told the man, that he once served someone. His name was Jianghu, a scholar. Yet he destroyed 30% of the martial arts world. Even the leader of the devil cult was moved by his few words. That night, the man found the old man to borrow wine to drown his sorrows. He thought going to school was better than living a life on the edge. But the elder voiced a different opinion. A knife can only harm one person at a time. But a word from a powerful person can kill countless others. Shuxian was just in tears, agreeing at this moment. But it wasn't because of the clothes. Rather, she believed her father had his reasons for doing this. At the same time, a person wearing a straw hat outside the courtyard was listening to their conversation. She told her father to treat her and her brothers equally. Dad suddenly jumped towards the basin. Luckily, the man reacted quickly. He caught her and said he would buy her some nice clothes. He couldn't possibly hit a woman, right? He immediately refused her firmly. Shuxian felt a little disappointed. She picked up a branch. She wrote 2 characters on the ground. I also don't know if this level is enough. Suddenly, a voice broke the silence. I want to be like my brothers too. This made the man feel troubled. No matter what. The next day, he prepared the potion. He soaked the 2 brothers in it. Watching the relaxed children, the man fell into deep thought. I really can't be as harsh on the kids as the master, and stated that he would pay for the medicinal herbs. But I need to borrow your body for some experiments. The man pondered for a moment, but for the sake of the child, he ultimately agreed. It was filled with precious medicinal herbs. You wouldn't have enough salary for half of them in a year. But after hearing that the man bought these herbs to strengthen his foundation, he remembered the man's powerful physique. He then put away the prescription. This left the man feeling helpless. Afterward, he sought out a divine doctor, hoping to buy some medicinal herbs. But when the divine doctor opened the prescription and took a look, his expression changed dramatically. Learning this martial art requires constantly taking hits. As soon as the stick struck my brother, the man dropped the stick, feeling heartbroken. But the brothers insisted on learning. They wanted to become men like their father. He conversed with the strategist of Tianlong Gate without missing a beat. With just a small trick, he made him believe there was a traitor among the higher-ups. He even staged a self-sacrifice scheme. This sparked conflicts throughout the martial world. And now, the man has finally decided to pass his martial arts on to the twins. However, his goal was completely opposite to theirs. His aim was to destroy the entire martial arts world. He is the one who killed the master of the 5th house. Fewer than 10 people in the world know his true identity. His son, at only 7 years old, is already extremely shrewd. After that, it continuously absorbed the martial arts world. The Chun family, inheriting his will, used various schemes to diminish the martial arts world. Yet even such a cunning family as the Chens was stripped of their position by this person. As soon as he appeared, 4 of the 10 major sects of the martial arts world closed their gates. But when the boy heard this, he threw back his head and laughed, saying it was something I got myself into. 70 years ago, the martial world and the court did not interfere with each other. Officials would never step into the conflicts of the martial world. Yet the deputy minister of the secretariat broke this situation with his own strength. A single document destroyed the power of the 3 cities in the martial arts world in just one day, and even luring out the reclusive heavenly dragon. But he also said he would ask his father to find a way for you to receive that disciple. The 2 old men then smiled and criticized his father for sending a boy on such a dangerous task. Meanwhile, the 2 demons of heaven and earth followed closely behind. They accused the boy of being in such a hurry to return home, ruining their plans. The boy frowned and replied, "It's because you both wanted to take on a disciple, revealing your identities." He gave the man a piece of advice: hide your strength, and then cultivate someone of your own. After saying that, he turned and left, leaving the man puzzled by the meaning of the words. A few days later, the boy boarded the ship home. He extended an olive branch to the man again, and stated that his father could uproot the guy who harmed your child. But the man did not agree. Seeing this, the boy stopped trying to save him. At the moment of parting, for a time, they are evenly matched. Soon after, the man looked at the gold in his hand, and couldn't help but smile. At that moment, the boy appeared and interrupted him. Thinking of this, he picked up his weapon. Both sides are masters of external martial arts. This is bound to be a tough battle. The fight is about to begin. Both sides are exchanging blows. A man pushed the door and walked in. He looked at the battered man. Tianri couldn't help but wonder. Could it be that he also fought with Lord Filong? It seems he's indeed a master. Inside the 5 Dragons Hall, the man whose voice echoed in the sky had said to her, "If you want to talk about slaying immortals, fight me first." At that moment, and there were issues with the child's internal energy. They need to accept their care. This couldn't help but startle the 2 elders. They immediately went inside to check. It seemed to be just as the man said. Finally remembered his 2 benefactors, he immediately bowed to thank them. However, when the old man spoke to take the child as his apprentice, the man refused, because he was currently too entangled with the heavenly dragon sect. but the man cannot recognize them. This angers the two old men. In an instant, they transform into two phantoms and come before the man. "It was us who saved your life back then." Hearing this, the man. At night, the man reflects on the battles of this time. At this moment, he finally believes in his own strength. It's just that he only encountered experts back then. He must confirm it for himself. Suddenly, two figures appear outside the courtyard wall. The man did not refuse, but he also proposed a condition, which was to request a duel. This made Phylong ask in surprise, "What exactly is the man thinking?" The man was somewhat surprised. He had actually defeated such a. Phylong observed the situation. He continued to speak. "The child's matters must be handled under his own supervision. It is the Martial Arts Alliance. The person you defeated at Sanmen Gorge is a disciple of the Alliance leader. His martial prowess is on par with Dian Yang, but now all the assassins are dead. There is no substantial evidence to prove that it was them. Flying Dragon is forging a sword at this moment." The man asks who harmed the child. Flying Dragon doesn't want to tell him, but after the man's repeated pleas, he slowly spoke up. The child would have to take them as teachers. The man isn't refusing him at this moment. However, if he wants to become a disciple, he must make the choice himself. In the Flying Dragon Hall, however, at this moment, he also learned from the heavens that his child's internal energy had issues. Though it wasn't serious, it still required the care of a master. This also meant he was gravely injured. At one point, he lay in the hospital, uncertain if he would survive. Even the miracle doctor said he would become a vegetable, but he woke up with strong willpower. His martial arts actually became even stronger because of it. The shadow spoke again, "This is just a warning. If there's a next time, I won't let it go easily." After saying this, his figure suddenly vanished. The man suffered a brutal beating from a martial arts master. "Even if it were your master speaking to me, it would still be with utmost respect." After saying this, he threw the box at him. The leader opened it and took a look. Inside, there was surprisingly the head of the owner of the Black Veil. This scene made even the highly skilled martial arts leader break out in a cold sweat. Suddenly, a figure appeared on the beam above. Even the leader hadn't noticed their presence. "What kind of powerful being is he?" he asked who the old acquaintance was. The man, upon hearing this, angrily cursed, "What old acquaintance?" The sudden assault directly obliterated Wuling Alliance's power. The leader of the textile division fell into deep thought. If they were to engage in a full-scale war with Tianlong's sect, other forces would surely profit from the chaos. But fortunately, there was no concrete evidence to justify their excuse. As a few beams of light burst forth from his body, the man sat up from the hospital bed. Looking at the child lying beside him, he lay down peacefully and fell asleep. At this moment, Tianlong's sect attacked Wuling Alliance's textile division. "Your talent is innate." Suddenly, the man's consciousness awakened, but he couldn't control his own body. He kept performing and interpreting in the stone sea. Finally, the man on the hospital bed opened his eyes. "This is already your limit. From now on, you must learn to take hits while standing. Only then can you learn to strike back." "Master, I took 3 years to learn this martial art." "But you only took 1. By the way, reclaim my ring." At that moment, the man was lying in a hospital bed. His mind filled with thoughts as his master stopped beating him. He looked up at the master, asking why, and the master said. Then his head suddenly slammed into the ground. But at that moment, Tian Susu raised her hand to stop him. "You go find a boy. Wait until he grows up and understands the ways of the world. Then bring him back." Tian Susu, instead of getting angry, calmly accepted it, saying if it's lost, so be it. But the young envoy was unwilling to let it go, insisting that he could retrieve it. This made Tian Susu feel slightly amused, thinking if that's the case, why even ask me? Hearing this, the young envoy's heart trembled. It was indeed the old sweeper of the Heavenly Dragon Gate. Outside the Demon Sect's hall, the left and right envoys led the disciples to kneel before Tian Susu. They lost the manual left behind by the previous leader, and the person who took the manual was a top-tier expert. "Why could you not recognize my children?" The owner sensed something was wrong, and immediately ordered an attack. As their figures approached the shadow, everyone finally saw the person's face clearly. They didn't expect that a failed mission would lead to such big trouble. Suddenly, a shadow blocked their path. The house owner instantly recognized that this person was skilled. He immediately cupped his fists and asked why the expert was blocking the road. "I see that," Shadow softly said, "since you have the eyes to recognize me." After his treatment, they now possessed 3 auras. He believes that, given the circumstances, everyone should teach the children how to cultivate. Also, those who cause trouble must experience the wrath of the Heavenly Dragon Gate. At night, Black Sand Square received the news and is now rushing through the jungle, coughing up a mouthful of blood. The miracle doctor hurried over to check. He was shocked to find that his body was recovering like a monster. At that moment, the senior members of Tianlongmen were holding a meeting. The reason was that Phylong had discovered 2 auras within the twins' bodies. There are others who want to become the children's masters. The man gets beaten up every day. The master told him this is the necessary path to becoming strong. Just as he was about to resist fiercely, he suddenly sat up in his hospital bed. His body seems to be even harder than Kunlun's. Feilong pondered upon hearing this. He stepped out of the room. He told everyone there was no danger, but aside from us. Soon after, he tells Feilong that the man is out of danger. But he also notices that the man's body is as hard as steel. This is something he's only seen before when treating Master Kongwon of Shaolin Temple. But the difference is, fortunately, Feilong discovered this early. The internal energy had not yet stabilized. It should be possible to successfully eliminate him. At this moment, the miracle doctor arrives. He immediately begins treating the man. But when his inner energy entered the boy's body, he discovered that the twins, who had never had a master, were practicing internal martial arts. At that moment, the assistant manager also noticed something unusual on Feilong's face. As his energy flowed into the boy's body, he was shocked to find that the twins had two different auras inside them. They went to take care of the aftermath. The flying dragon hurriedly brought the three to the medical clinic. He called the divine doctor for the man. Meanwhile, he used his energy to heal the child. He had the assistant manager support the boy. The man and the children were found lying in the ruined temple. Not far away, the two demons of heaven and earth were watching this scene. They fed the man the heavenly honey egg, and they realized the kidnapper belonged to the Black Veil workshop. With that, the two of them rushed into the forest. The man finally couldn't hold on any longer. He swayed and fell to the ground. A shadow helped him up, then took him away from here. The next morning, the assassin a slight smile. Then, he raised his fist and swung it fiercely at his face. He couldn't even remember how many punches he'd thrown. He just vented all his anger and sadness on the assassin's face tonight. At this point, the assassin was already unrecognizable. Thinking of this, he raised his dagger and charged at the man. But just as the dagger was about to pierce the man unexpectedly grabbed the dagger with his bare hand. The assassin was caught between advancing and retreating due to the man's immense strength. The man gave. It was because the severely injured man actually stood up. He forced a smile through the pain. It's just getting started. The assassin knew well that the two elders were formidable. If he wanted to survive, he had to deal with the man first. In the grass, two old men instantly transformed into shadows. They had clearly defined roles. The order was to rescue the two children. The assassin felt a shiver in his heart. But it wasn't because the children were taken away. The assassin winced in pain. Anger surged within him. He kicked the man away. But when he focused his gaze, he saw a smile creeping at the corner of the man's mouth. He's waiting for a chance. Suddenly, he sees two figures appear in the bushes. He knows his chance has come. He quickly spins around. He bit down on the assassin's calf, picked up the long staff of the iron lock. He ruthlessly beats the man. The intense pain makes the man's eyes bloodshot. But even so, he doesn't give up. Even against the top assassination group in the martial arts world, he could triumph. But even such a powerful person, when his own child was held hostage, could only obediently drop his weapon. Seeing this, the assassin and the assassins arrived close behind him. The man drew out a weapon he'd long kept hidden and faced them. Just as the man dealt with the last assassin, the captain who kidnapped the child hurried over. He was highly skilled in combat, so he had to divert their attention to himself. The man sprinted towards the riverbank. Even though he was wounded by a hidden weapon from behind, he never stopped running. Finally, he reached the riverbank. He then told everyone he would wait by the river. Put the child down. Come settle this. As soon as he finished speaking, his figure suddenly appeared. He didn't want to give them time to think. The children wouldn't live long either. Thinking of this, he hid in the straw. This caused the group of assassins to lose track of him for a moment. The man took advantage of the situation to retrieve his weapon. Two figures moved at the sound. The man did not let himself be slaughtered. Instead, he fought back, because he knew, if he died, and dropped his weapon, the man told him to let the child go, promising that he would willingly accept death. The assassin also realized that this was not the courage of an ordinary warrior. Thinking of this, he ordered his men to act quickly. He threatened the man to drop his weapon. After speaking, he suddenly tightened his grip around the child's neck. This scene filled the man with unprecedented rage. In desperation, he raised his hands. He just moved forward again. He had to reduce their numbers. Just then, a figure interrupted him. An assassin appeared behind the man with a child, his weapon aimed straight at a head. The assassins, already lying in ambush, leapt out. In an instant, they surrounded him. He realized that these people were stronger than before. But he didn't panic. He vowed to make this unknown organization pay. The man was taken by the assassins to a rice field. It was once a place where he played with his children. He quietly counted the numbers in his mind. Then he suddenly lunged forward. He bit down on poison and killed himself. Assassins were fleeing from all sides of the city walls. It seemed they were trying to confuse us. He ordered his men to return to their posts, while secretly pondering to himself. The man followed them outside. Meanwhile, the twin demons of heaven and earth were closely following in the air. On the city wall, the flying dragon took care of many assassins trying to flee over it. Though one was left alive, he moved at the sound. In just a moment, half of them were already dead or injured. The one at the door panicked and said he knew where the child was. If you want to know, follow me. Helplessly slumped in the corner, crying. Suddenly, footsteps came from the doorway. The man tightened his grip on the weapon, as the enemy prepared to strike with a sword, as he stabbed the man. After that, the man got himself drunk. The pursuit of power lured them in. But as time went by, there was still no progress. He angrily kicked over the table. I've guarded the gate for 10 years. I haven't offended anyone. Suddenly, a figure appeared in his mind. Is it from the martial world? Their target is me. The man slapped his cheek. Staying alert, he knew those experts were still out there. The assassin must still be hiding in the city. Then why did they kidnap their own child? He walks along the path once taken by the children. Following their trail, he arrives at the ruined temple. But they have long since vanished. This helpless feeling reminds him of the powerful figures he encountered when he first entered the martial world. Waving the weapon, trying to reclaim the feeling he once had, he was determined to find their child. In a daze, his wife's figure appeared by his side again, as if to remind him to stay safe. Then he dug out the box he'd sealed away for years. Inside was a picture of his wife, and beneath the photo was the weapon he had promised his wife never to use again. He walked into the pouring rain. They can be trained again. The man's child was kidnapped by a top assassin. Upon hearing the news, he briefly lost his mind. He forced himself to calm down, and they had quit smoking throughout the whole time. Things were getting more and more complicated. As he spoke, he thought to himself, it seems I'll have to use that move. Anyway, the subordinates are gone. As if he had made a decision. The twins were kidnapped to this ruined temple by the Black Veil clan. The captain looked at the two unconscious children. He couldn't help but frown. Why would the children of an ordinary warrior be with such experts? But seeing the man's expression, she said nothing more. The man returned to the room, pounding his body in a frenzy. He forced himself to calm down. He had to find his child himself. Saying this, he looked towards the side of the bed. So how did they go missing? That night, the man returned home in a daze. The nurse saw him and asked what had happened. The man told him to go home first. The wet nurse was somewhat surprised. The man rushed over after hearing the news. He anxiously asked about the whereabouts of the children. At this moment, Feilong's aura was surging. I will find them. Hearing this, the man could no longer stay calm. As he spat out a few mouthfuls of blood. The children have been captured. Feilong instantly flew into a rage. His subordinates informed him that the city is now under martial law. At that moment, Feilong rushed back to the shop upon hearing the news. To his surprise, Xiao Xia was severely injured and lying in bed, and it is beyond the ability of ordinary people to heal. He ordered his subordinates to help Xiao Xia up. Then, he used his internal energy to heal his wounds. Seeing this, Xiao Xia protected the child behind him. He then drew his sword, ready to fight. Not long after, I hurriedly found the man who was at work. I informed him that the twins had disappeared. This news struck the man like lightning. This scene made the twins extremely happy. Not long after, he was planning to take the children home, when suddenly a figure appeared right in front of him. It unexpectedly left a scar on his face. Two assassins wearing masks appeared in front of the three. It seemed that a master had already acted before him, but he was not panicked, and claimed that he had even more powerful skills. After saying this, he picked up the child and performed lightness skill. He weaved through the jungle. Then he immediately displayed his lightness skill, moving freely through the air. The twins, upon seeing this, said that a grandfather had already shown them, and he was walking in the air. This made him feel unsettled. Vented to his junior brothers. Xiao Xia, upon hearing this, thought that if they wanted to recruit disciples, they should start with children. Afterward, he found the twins. Using martial arts demonstration as an excuse, he took them to a small grove, and invited the three to join him. But unexpectedly, his sister rejected him on the spot. After saying that, she left with her brothers. This also made Wei Shou's bald head fill with rage. After failing to recruit disciples, the deputy shop owner of Feilong's shop, they had no choice but to bite the bullet and head up. Inside the Dragon Dance Hall, three dancers found the triplets. They claimed to be members of the Qianlong Society, and would one day become part of a team filled with experts from the Tianlong Society. Members of the Black Veil clan received the assassination target information, but it was clearly just an ordinary warrior. The information from the higher-ups was unusually detailed. This made them feel uneasy, but since the order was given, leaving all the martial masters outside. At night, the man, to make it up to the children, took them to the market, unaware that he was already being watched. In a rundown temple, the crowd surrounded the man, chattering away. What they meant was that they wanted to take the child as their disciple. However, the man rejected the many olive branches offered by the experts, because he did not want his child to live a life of licking blood on the edge of a blade. With that, he shut the door. The man looked a bit awkward upon seeing this. After hastily saying goodbye to a few people, he went home. The man left home for half a year to earn money for milk. He returned home again, but he found that his child was being watched by many experts. At this moment, the man was enticed by the boy's offer, his eyes gleaming. He even flashed a subtle smile, but just as he was about to agree, Lord Long walked in through the door. He said that if anyone wanted to poach someone, they needed his approval. However, their father has been sent on a confidential mission, and none of the higher-ups are aware of this matter. Lord Long has his reasons for doing this as well, because he sensed a traitor among the higher-ups. He said he would reveal it to everyone when the time was right, and just watching the main gate is enough. Meanwhile, the higher-ups of the Tianlong Society are currently in a heated argument over the triplets. Everyone wants to take the children as their disciples, but everything must first be discussed with their father. As the man heard this, his impression of the boy changed at that moment. Seeing this, the boy extended an olive branch, stating that no matter how much they offer you here, I will give you 10 times that. He noted that although he was not yet 50, becoming a father had made him understand his fate. This also drew the boy's attention. The man is indeed impressive. He really is handsome. His men told them to wait there. Feeling bored, the man studied the calligraphy on the wall. In the past 6 months, he had learned the 1,000-character classic with Tian Miao. At this moment, he could at least understand the characters in the painting. Although the man was reluctant to go, he grit his teeth and endured it out of anger. But when he intended to bid farewell to Tian Miao, he found that he had already vanished. After that, he took the boy into a room. Shortly afterward, the man arrived outside Tianlong City. The electric horsemen had long been waiting here. After greeting the boy, they indicated that they would arrest him next. They also asked the man to go with them. But the deputy leader still believes there are many uncertainties. Yet, there's no turning back once the bow is drawn. All they can do now is pray for the mission's success. After saying this, he requested permission from the leader to use the strategy of gold cicada sheds its shell if necessary. But after hearing the man's words, he becomes angry. He picks up a paper eagle and starts gnawing on it. Inside the black sand room, the deputy leader released the carrier pigeons. They are now ready to carry out the mission. On the other side, a man is gorging himself at the restaurant. He sees a skinny boy unwilling to eat. He immediately pushes a paper eagle in front of the boy and tells him to finish it. The boy initially wanted to refuse. Fai Long indeed looked troubled, because he knew that many experts had already taken an interest in them. He expressed that he would be content as long as he could occasionally teach them. But the disciples were unwilling to settle for that. They wanted to fight for their master's right to take them in. At this moment, Fai Long also picked up the long sword that had been gathering dust for years. It was the sword his disciples had used when they were young. The disciples, upon seeing this scene, knew that their master truly favored the triplets. But when they asked about it, Dian Yuan refused to give up. Because at that moment, he saw the shadow of Dapeng. Dianlong was somewhat shocked. After confirming 3 times, he said he would give it a try. At this moment, Captain Dianlong found Dianyang. He begged him to help take the triplets as disciples. But they were too outstanding, attracting the attention of many masters. Even one of the dragon dancers, Dianlong, found it hard to act, and just taking the hits. But the 2 brothers said that winning was the most important thing. It was just an ordinary martial arts tournament, yet it attracted the attention of many top masters. They all wanted to take the triplets as disciples. The master appeared, interrupting the performance. The crowd erupted in excitement. Everyone applauded and cheered. Only the younger sister angrily scolded him for not using a different move. They stumbled. The citizen seized the opportunity. With a sidekick, he broke the long stick in the opponent's hand. He kicked forward again. Just as he was about to kick again. At this moment, the opponent's feet are numb. They are already like a strong bow that has lost its strength. He was caught off guard by the citizen who seized the long stick. Suddenly, he leaned forward and threw a punch. The opponent winced in pain. Many masters had already begun calculating how to take the twins as disciples. The twin demons of heaven and earth were also among the audience. They too noticed the attention of the many masters. Just as the 2 were worrying about how to seize the twins, the warrior had already approached his opponent. In an instant, the citizen finds himself dodging clumsily. Seeing one tactic fail, he immediately decided to withstand the staff attack, to numb his opponent's limbs. While the 2 were in the heat of battle, This maximizes the limitation of his opponent's attacks. Next, he just needs to wait for an opportunity to close in. But the opponent is well aware of this principle. How could he let him close in easily? Suddenly, the long staff strikes like lightning. But this guy was the most dangerous of the three. Because he had many techniques with the stick, he could attack or defend. And the citizens deeply remembered his advice. He lowers his body. His opponent was a martial artist skilled with a staff. The son reminded the citizens to keep their distance. He immediately tied a headscarf around his head to distinguish himself from the brothers. Then he stepped onto the field and assumed his stance. The son had once said. When Yen was furious on the spot and argued back. Just as the two were in a heated argument, Dianlong stepped in to ease the tension, stating that the match wasn't over yet. Seeing this, the younger brother eagerly prepared to step in, saying it was his turn. But just then, a voice interrupted them. How can this be considered a duel? Even a couple of random thugs could fight like this. The one who said this was none other than Hong Mao's father, Tian Rishang. He closed his eyes and fainted. Gong Xian hurriedly withdrew his fist and supported the parted hair man. The crowd below cheered and clapped in approval. Even Tian Rishang gave them a thumbs up. After speaking, Gong Xian's figure suddenly surged forward. After the two exchanged moves, Gong Xian thought to himself, it's over. Then he raised both fists and swung them out. But just as his fists were about to hit the center-parted one, he hoped to have a match without using any trick moves. Little did he know, it was actually because he was too fast. The opponent finally faced him head-on. But the center-parted one didn't make it clear. He just casually agreed. At this moment, his opponent on stage stumbled after Gongshan's knee kick. Seeing this, Gongshan didn't press the attack. He simply waited in place for his opponent to adjust his stance. The middle-parted hair guy thanked Gongshan. But in response, Gongshan just waved his arm. For a moment, the two seemed evenly matched. This scene caused the onlookers to show concern. Even Tennichi furrowed his brows. It seemed because the opponent wasn't changing moves. That's why he thought about going head-to-head. But the chamber leader was arrogant. They thought even if that samurai was a top master, the strongest warrior in the room could easily handle him. After saying this, they ordered the deputy head to carry out the task quickly. Meanwhile, the battle in the palace had reached a fever pitch. They strike ruthlessly and leave no trace. Today, they received another commission from a mysterious master, to assassinate a grade A warrior of the Tianlong Guild. After the vice-chamber leader learned of this, he believed there must be something hidden behind it. At that moment, Tian Miao also realized her own feelings. Blushing, she said, "Stop bothering me." Hearing this, the man stopped paying attention to her. He was merely imagining the moment of meeting his children. The Black Sand Chamber is the most powerful assassination organization in the martial world. How can such a foolish person have such powerful martial arts? However, Tian Miao's words also made the man realize whether he should find a mother for his children. Thinking of this, he asked Tian Miao if she knew any women to introduce to him. Unexpectedly, Tian Miao loudly shouted, "No." The man revealed a polite smile. At that moment, Tian Miao asked about the man's child. Upon hearing this, the man gradually expressed his lack of interest in men. This left the boy speechless. "This time, you can use the special move I taught you." Meanwhile, the boat that the man was on had already docked. After saying goodbye to the rigid rules, he went to the Heavenly Dragon Association to greet the few people's carriage, thinking that he was about to receive his reward. However, Gong Xian said he could continue. After all, last time he fought against 3 of them and they couldn't beat him. This time, facing them one by one is much easier. Tian Ri smiled upon hearing this. He then called Gong Xian to his side. The foot aimed at Hong Mao was stopped by Dianlong stepping in. At the same time, he declared Gong Xian's victory. Right after that, the second round began. This left Tian Ri feeling displeased, immediately asking why there was no rest, and suddenly leaned forward, delivering a powerful punch. He suddenly lifted his right leg and kicked out. At that moment, a large hand grabbed it. Just before it could strike, Gong Xian seemed to remember something. He looked at the changes in Hong Mao's wrist. To him, the attacks appeared to move as slowly as a snail. After a series of agile dodges, Gong Xian seized the opportunity. In no time, he has left the bowstring in a bit of a mess. But after a tough battle, his gaze remained sharp. At that moment, the girl in the audience shouted loudly, "Don't just watch. The sun is very gratifying." I indeed did not misjudge the person. The second round of combat quickly begins. Holding a wooden sword, Hong Mao is truly exceptional. The long sword in hand is unpredictable, claiming that they were as light as a feather, but could block sharp blades. However, Gongxian returned the gloves after hearing this, because he believed that even if he won with them, it wouldn't be honorable. The bowstring reached out to help him up. Unexpectedly, he was pushed away. Then he stood up and asked the master to let him use a wooden sword. Tian Ri saw this and called Gongxian back. He gave Gongxian a pair of gloves. He struck the bowstring with his fist. However, this was already within the bowstring's expectations. He retracted his fist and leaned forward. Then, he pushed forward with both hands. Hong Mao fell to the ground first. Feeling insulted, Red Hair suddenly exerts force with his legs. He lifts his fist and swings it fiercely at Yumi. The latter doesn't dodge. He raises his fist to meet the blow, but Hong Mao suddenly changed his move. Their appearance caused a stir throughout the audience. The match begins amidst loud cheers. First to enter the ring are Yumi and Red Hair. After bowing to each other, they take their stances. Yumi waves at Red Hair, signaling for him to make the first move, but the Dragon Dance shop owner reassured him, "Don't worry, I'll step in when necessary." The twins had only performed a basic boxing routine, yet they caught the attention of two top masters. Moreover, they decided to take the competition winner as a disciple, and could personally teach him how to wield it. With their appearance, the ordinary competition reached an unprecedented height, but Tianri still wasn't pleased. These were clearly disciples of his own choosing. The father of the three dancers is unforgettable. But just then, another figure suddenly descended. It was yet another dragon dancer, Phylon. He offered to gift his recently forged sword to the winner. One of the dragon dancers from the Tianlong Society, the Electric Dragon, suddenly jumped into the venue. After bowing and greeting, he expressed his willingness to personally guide the winner of this event. As soon as he finished speaking, the whole place erupted. Yet, this seemingly ordinary stance attracted the attention of many skilled practitioners. The Dragon Dance shop owner was very pleased to see this. This also made Tianri feel quite proud. But just at that moment, both sides need to demonstrate the martial arts they practiced first. The three dancers spun their weapons gracefully. The audience couldn't help but applaud enthusiastically. In contrast, the triplets were still performing the most basic punches. The second half of the manual had been ruined by the child's urine. Meanwhile, the boy beside him secretly wondered why this technique seemed so familiar. Time flies, and the martial arts tournament they had agreed upon had already begun. According to the rules, he immediately aimed a punch at the man's head, cursing idiot out loud. Back then, he studied the secret manual left by his master until late at night. In the end, he fell asleep because he was too tired. When he woke up, but Mosu noticed something unusual. "Why didn't you learn the second half?" The man looked a bit awkward. He then leaned close to Mosu's ear and whispered something. Unexpectedly, Mosu flew into a rage. But when he came to, he only saw Tian Miao sitting on the ground, shyly. He didn't pay much attention. "I was just looking for Mosu to practice a bit." After saying that, he began demonstrating his unique skills on the deck. What is the purpose of this operation? Thinking of this, he informed Tianri. He would personally go investigate. On the other side, a man was napping on the deck. He was suddenly awakened by a scream. He doesn't even have permission to view them himself. The shopkeeper was taken aback upon hearing this. But at the same time, questions arose in his mind. Isn't this the warrior who survived the recent battle? What exactly is Lord Long doing? Started chatting with him like a child. Tian Rishang told the owner. They are gifted triplets. Their father is merely a Class A warrior, yet his records are classified as Class A confidential. He thought of the once domineering Wuzuan. Inside the Wulong Hall, Tian Rishang excitedly found the Wulong Hall owner, and told him that he was going to have a disciple. Unexpectedly, the usually calm owner, upon hearing this, after being treated multiple times by the divine doctor, he finally woke up at this moment. Upon hearing this, the leader of the martial arts world spoke of the matter. An inevitable legacy in his heart. There are actually people in this world who can forge their bodies as hard as steel. The master of the Jianghu, six-eyed, exerted all his strength to stab at the man, yet he received it with his body. After this battle, Six-eyed was left in a state of life and death, but when he looked up, he found that the master had already vanished. Be careful of the drumming squad on your way down. The scene shifts. The stronghold of the drumming squad was engulfed in flames. He handed the boy a ring. If you take this to the Liu family bank, it will bring me back to your side. Then you'll get what you want. The boy initially wanted to refuse. You still need to protect me. You are the second. After saying this, he disappeared into the rice fields. When the leader returned again, the boy had already woken up. He didn't make a sound. Seeing they couldn't get any answers, the Gurga team mounted their horses and left. Shortly after they left, Tian Susu gently stroked the boy's head. Weaker than me. They asked the boy if he had seen a woman. The boy replied that he had not. Unexpectedly, the man dismounted and gave the boy a vicious beating. The boy was beaten until his head was covered in blood. But even so, the boy pulled the master into the house, and advised him not to speak. He then quickly closed the door. He hurried back to the rice field. Moments later, a group of people rushed over. Meanwhile, the demon cult leader had just come down from the mountain. Lost in thought, he saw a boy in the rice fields who resembled his brother. This momentarily stunned him. By the time he snapped out of it, he was unexpectedly pulled away by him. As he said this, his subordinate hurriedly reported. The Tianlong Society and the Jiandao sect are also involved. Upon hearing this, the alliance leader was even more confused. The peace treaty is about to expire. What exactly are they planning? The leader was furious upon learning of Liu Yan's severe injury. He was extremely angry. There are fewer than 100 people in the entire martial world who can deal with Liu Yan, besides that one from the 5 families. Who else could have beaten Liu Yan like this? There are only a handful of people in this world who possess such a fishing rod. The man knows very well that Mo wants him to disembark. But just then, the usually quiet boy suddenly spoke. I'll give you the fishing rod, but you must first take us to the Sichuan Martial Alliance. I never expected Mo to act up again. All I want is gold. If it's something else, it has to be at least a dragon fishing rod. If not, then you should get off at the next stop. Immediately cursed Mo for being heartless. Meanwhile, Tian Miao thought for a moment, and said, I can give you 500 taels. After speaking, he fumbled in his coat for a while, and pulled out a pearl worth 500 taels of gold. He pleaded with Mozho beside him to send him back to the Tianlong Society. Mozho did not agree, but if you give me 400 taels of gold, then that's a different story. Hearing this, Lanrun, while the man was brought onto the ship by Tian Miao, the man knew this was definitely Mosho's idea, so he forced to smile, and said thank you to him. The next day, the man woke up leisurely on the deck. Not long after, the man calmed down. He realized he was in a dark place, on a boat. It turns out that after the two collapsed that day, Liu Yan was taken away by his men, who were truly in danger nearby. At this moment, Grandpa thought to himself, why has that guy been so quiet lately? Meanwhile, the man on the boat was convulsing uncontrollably. This sight terrified Tian Miao, who was standing nearby. Upon hearing this, Grandpa broke out in a cold sweat. He told Shuxian that he had once been deceived, and that he could only use martial arts against those, before father returns. Don't mislead her naive brothers again. After that, Shuxian went to complain to Grandpa, because Grandpa often boasts about having once unified the world. Shuxian wanted him to show her the void step. As soon as these words were spoken, the two elders were shocked and alarmed, and hurriedly explained that they were stronger in other areas. But Shuxian didn't want to argue with them. She simply told them. At this moment, they were even levitating, walking on air, but Shuxian saw this with disdain all over her face. She even remarked bluntly that she had seen it before, and she had walked farther than they did. A group called the Gugu team attacked our followers. Tian Susu listened intently. A wicked smile crept across his lips. Then he immediately ordered his men to leave first. The two old janitors were once legends in the martial world. That person is quite perceptive. In an instant, he disappeared without a trace. After that, Tian Susu came to her brother's grave. At that moment, her subordinate hurried over to report. I will support at any time. Hearing this, Tian Susu sneered contemptuously. If this sect leader wants, anything can be obtained with virtual power. Blood stained the ground red. Tian Susu walks amidst the blood-red scene, but the surrounding devastation is not his doing. A figure appears behind him. If the sect leader needs my power, the man did not evade, but instead met him head-on with his long sword. After a sharp clash, both fell to the ground, on a terraced field. For a moment, he found himself unable to match his opponent, but because of this, he made a determination. Coming to his senses, the six-eyed one had already lunged with his sword, but just as their swords clashed in that moment, the man's wrist suddenly felt a sharp pain. With no choice, he could only jump to the side to dodge. Unexpectedly, the six-eyed creature followed closely behind. The man was somewhat flustered. This surprised him a bit. It seems he needed to kill this guy first. With that, he sprang into action. He swung his sword at the man. The latter hurriedly raised his sword to block. The latter swung his sword to block the incoming water columns. Then, he thrust his longsword towards Mo. He never expected to be struck by a jet of water towards the deck. Turning back to look, he was shocked to find that his men had all been eliminated by the man. With a sudden force, he threw him towards the crowd. Immediately, he charged back into the enemy ranks. On the other side, the six-eyed creature had already jumped onto the deck. This made Mo extremely furious. He raised his hand, and several water columns shot towards the six-eyed creature. Unexpectedly, in that brief distraction, a warrior had already raised his sword behind him. The man couldn't dodge in time and was struck by the blow. But he did not fall because of it. Instead, he turned back and hugged his thigh. The martial arts alliance swarmed out. The man did not back down upon seeing this. He simply raised his sword and charged forward. After a round of fighting, the man started to feel sore all over. How could he let him leave easily? He glared at Mo in anger. If he is unwilling to hand over the child, then he will have to take offense. With that, he gave the order. Then he leaped down. As the man disembarked, Mo ordered his men to set sail. This scene shocked Lu Yan greatly. His target is that child. Unexpectedly, Mo's previously calm face changed drastically upon hearing about the children. But he didn't say anything. He just nodded slightly. After receiving a response, the man smiled slightly at Mo. Seeing this, Mo showed no mercy. He just told the man to get off the boat quickly. Before leaving, the man requested Mo to take the two of them into the territory of the Heavenly Dragon Society, because only in this way could his children survive. A voice interrupted them. Idiot brother. What are you doing? The boat that the man is on has also docked at this moment. The members of the Martial Arts Alliance have been waiting for a long time. Of course, that wasn't enough. The two demonstrated powerful martial arts skills on the spot. This made the two kids light up with excitement. They immediately decided to become their disciples. But just as they were about to kneel down, they noticed the twins' extraordinary talent, and decided to take them as disciples. So they quietly found the twins, and bought a bunch of snacks, showered them with exaggerated compliments. But to outsiders, it seems, what they practiced were just ordinary moves. And because of that, the students at the martial arts school always mocked him. But the two elders didn't see it that way. He can split mountains and crack stones with just one move. Every time he strikes, there's no variation. He crushes everything solely with his techniques. Years of training have brought his body to perfection. The martial arts he teaches the child are the same. Shuxian replied that she wasn't a boy. No matter how much she learned, she couldn't achieve fame and success. The old man did not respond. I just feel that this child is too intelligent. I really hope nothing happens to him. That is his idol. His dream is to grow up to be someone like Bing Di. After listening, he learned to sweep the floor with the old man. Wherever they went, there were several neat gardens. The old man asked Shuxian why she was unwilling to learn more. He should have told him the battle location from the beginning. If the Martial Alliance really wants to come, then the sects in the alert area would be instantly crushed. It seems the only option is to seek help from the Five Dragon Temple. Meanwhile, Sukhyun is listening to Grandpa Sweeper telling stories about battlefields. This created a rift between the two. Inside the Dragon Hall, Master Long has already received the captain's distress message, but still hasn't found the man's whereabouts. Master Long shows a worried expression. Years ago, Darius's master and the man's master left home together. Darius hoped the man would join him in searching for them, but the man believed that since they left without leaving any word behind, there was no need to search for them. Noxus angrily ordered the man to disembark at the next stop. The man was taken aback and asked, "Do you really want me dead? Those guys will actually kill me." Seeing that Noxus ignored him, the man roared angrily, "Is it my fault that the old masters ran away from home? But he was almost invincible on water. There is no chance of winning against him." So after asking for the next docking point, he led his men away. Not long after they left, "I hope you will allow me to take them away." However, Mo Shawan flatly refused him on the spot, because he couldn't break the rules on the boat. But once they disembarked, he wouldn't interfere. Lu Yan was somewhat angry at these words. In an instant, it formed a gigantic water orb, and smashed down on the crowd with Mo's exclamation of congratulations. Looking at the overwhelming water light, Lu Yan just realized at this moment that this person could only be the water ghost. He quickly cupped his fists and saluted, "I am Lu Yan of the Martial Alliance. They are sworn enemies of our alliance." But the six-eyed one just wouldn't listen. With his furious roar, a group of subordinates charged at Mo with their swords. But in the next moment, a massive wave surged onto the deck, charging towards the man. The next second, dozens of water droplets instantly swept these uninvited guests off the deck. Mo, growing impatient, warned them not to fight. Otherwise, get out. People called him the water ghost, Mo Shui. There was a rule on his ship. That is, once on board, no fighting is allowed. But there are always those who don't believe it. Six Eyes led a group of his men and jumped onto the deck, and slowly boarded the ship. His body was covered in scars. He spat out a mouthful of blood. Smiling at Mo, who was quickly boarding, he said, "Both feet are on the ground now." He had dominated the waters for years. The tremendous force almost caused the man to fall into the water. Even so, he still held tightly onto the mast without letting go. Moments later, the mast was actually pulled apart by him. The man stepped onto the mast. He then grabbed the sail. He thought to himself that he was finally safe. But Mo coldly said, "Your feet haven't even touched the ground yet." Then he suddenly raised his hand and waved. A column of water surged toward the man. But just at that moment of approaching, the pursuer caught up from behind. A palm strike hit the man's back. The man was knocked several meters away, crashing onto the deck. But he used that force to leap into the air. Upon hearing the command, his men quickly drew their bows and shot at the man. Though it seemed fast, to the man, it felt as slow as a homecoming. He raised his hand to block the arrow. Then he charged towards the sailboat. He suddenly lifted it up. With great force, he threw it towards the sailboat. Next, he just needed to get on himself. After saying that, he dove forward to shake hands. Seeing this, he roared an order for his men to stop him. What has happened now? Could it be that the matter hasn't been resolved yet? But he didn't care about that anymore. He suddenly leaped back. Arriving next to the warrior, water splashed constantly from his hands. He suddenly swung a punch at the man. This sudden change left the man somewhat unprepared. The two had grown up together since childhood. They once stole buns together and got beaten up. On the deck stands a sturdy dancer. The man thought he was saved. Unexpectedly, as the boat approached, the dancer started shouting curses at the man. After that, he leaped off the boat. This inevitably raised doubts among the crowd. Yet the man just smiled slightly. Then he raised his voice and shouted, "Emoja, I'm here." The originally calm waters instantly became turbulent. A sailboat is rushing toward the shore. He seemed to care a lot about the boy. Life and death could only obediently escort the man towards the Sanmenxia. In no time at all, they had arrived at the dock, but there were no boats docked here. "Let that guy go. I'll let you leave alive." Hearing this, the man made a proposal. "When I board the ship at Sanmenxia, I will hand over the child." Although Lu Yen didn't want to agree. "Let me kill you first." Then he suddenly grabbed the boy's throat. The immense pressure made it hard for the boy to breathe. This scene also left Lu Yen shocked. He shouted, "Stop." Unexpectedly, the boy said, "Don't worry about me. Those guys won't kill me." The man couldn't understand the meaning behind the words, but at the same time, he seemed to think of something. He lifted his longsword and placed it against the boy's neck. "Since you're going to die anyway." The man had just taken a breath when countless warriors descended from the sky. Among them was a master known as Six Eyes. The man knew this time the odds were against him, so he told the warrior to seize the chance and escape with the boy. He shouted, "Wait," and hurriedly fled. He alone could sweep through an entire army, but after countless battles, big and small, he was now gravely injured. Seeing this, the man rushed toward him. After a few steps, he leaped into the air. He used his knee to brace against the sword. Then, with a headbutt, he slammed into the warrior. The warrior was caught off guard. He was reluctant to intervene. At the same time, several enemies charged forward. The man used his body to block the incoming long swords. Then he threw several punches in retaliation. In the distance, the warrior had just unsheathed his sword. Having said that, his figure suddenly lunged forward, fiercely colliding with an enemy. At the same time, a man lunged at his waist with a sword. The man sidestepped to avoid it. Then, a knife came crashing down with an elbow strike. Yet, that warrior merely stood at a distance and watched, but encountered pursuers once again. The difference was that this time there was a warrior among them who looked exceptional. The man set down the child and urged the warrior beside him to find an opportunity to escape. There, they'd be in the sword blade sect's territory. They should be able to catch a break. With that, they continued on their way. A few days later, they were already approaching Sanmenxia. This made the man sigh with emotion. Why are these martial arts people so cruel? But remembering the beatings he had taken, he couldn't help but shiver. He quickly picked up the boy and hurried towards Shangxi. The pursuers quickly caught up with them. The man realized he had to deal with them to continue on his journey. With this thought, he put down the child and charged at the enemy. In no time, he wiped them all out. The man felt he looked very familiar, yet he couldn't recall when he had seen him before, but he didn't think much of it. After hastily burying the body, he began his escape. "You have to bring me back alive. If I die, it will cause a big problem." Looking at the boy who spoke disrespectfully, for some reason. So, the next morning, using the excuse of whispering, he executed the enemy who had been hiding for a long time. But the boy behind him saw this and smiled. "It seems the heavenly dragon will send someone." Then he pretends he needs to go to the bathroom. Let them take the child and leave first. He then circled back to the resting spot. As expected, he found the signal left by the man. This confirmed to him that it was a trap. This makes the man sense the taste of conspiracy. Moreover, he clearly hasn't noticed that there are pursuers behind him. Yet, he continues to urge himself to move forward. Sure enough, while resting, the man notices something is off. This made Tiansu wonder, who could have beaten him to it? At the same time, a figure appeared in his mind. On the other side, the man is running wildly through the jungle. The burly man behind him keeps urging him to change plans and take the water route. Outside the main base of the blood den, a figure streaked through the sky and landed. It was none other than Tiansu from the Heavenly Tribunal, returning after destroying the blood den. But as he approached, he found the place had already been bloodied. But he also noticed something suspicious. Not only were the meals the customers were eating cold, but in the entire restaurant, there was no smell of food at all. "It seems we've been watched for a long time." He changed his mind. He sat down in front of the burly man's desk. He signaled with the code. After confirming he was one of the street people, he led the samurai out of the restaurant. This means that even a slight mistake during the mission could cost your life. The man initially wanted to brush it off, because he was the father of 3 children. He didn't want to risk his life over it, but when he saw the boy's scars, was led into the tavern by a burly man. The man saw this and realized that this was his contact. A day earlier, the captain had told the man to retrieve the child, while he went to get backup from the organization. The mission has now been upgraded to a top priority mission. Only then did the younger sister happily agree. After that, he bid farewell to the 3, and turned away. A 7-year-old child, emaciated from hunger, and covered in scars. If he wanted to take on a disciple, the entire Tianlong city would be swarmed in an instant. If that's the case, then before your father returns, I'll train you myself. I am the deputy master of Wulong Hall. Do you want to become my disciples? Unexpectedly, the younger sister immediately refused. He directly said he needed his father's permission. Tianri was a bit shocked. Instead, he used the force to leap towards Tian Rishang's back, and actually managed to kick the back of his head. Tian Rishang was overjoyed. It seemed like he had found a gem today. He sat cross-legged in front of the 3 of them. Unexpectedly, it was still easily resolved. Before they could react, the 3 attacked again. But this time it was different. After being blocked, the younger sister didn't fall back. The sister focused on the upper body, while the brother focused on the lower stance, but was blocked by the sunlight one by one. The 3 retreated behind. They then coordinated again to throw the younger sister out. But just before that, Tian Rishang suddenly stood up. First, I need to confirm your strength. As he spoke, the triplets had already taken their positions in front of him. The 3 cooperated seamlessly. This child will surely achieve great things in the future. Thinking of this, he shouted loudly, "What the hell is punishment? Uncle will help you solve it." The triplets listened. They all happily bowed to Tian Rishang. My sister asked again, "What punishment will the martial arts school give us? Their father holds a high position and great power. I know they won't let this go easily." This makes Tian Ri even more surprised. Are they going to negotiate with me? But my sister denied it, saying they insulted my father. If we stay silent after hearing such words, then why are we practicing martial arts? In my heart, I couldn't help but think, what a clever little girl, before he could react. So she hurriedly approached him, and bowed to him. She then invited him inside. Seeing the daylight, I really like the triplets. So you are the little troublemakers. Yet he angrily rebukes his brother for being too gentle. At that moment, a figure appeared outside the wall. He told everyone that he was Master Tian Ri from the martial arts school. The sister realized that this person held high status. The intense pain caused the captain to faint for a moment. Meanwhile, the sister learned that her brothers had gotten into trouble. She thought to herself that those 2 idiot brothers were causing trouble for dad again. But when she heard that they had insulted their father, the man brings him back home. Unfortunately, the leader is too severely injured. Immediate medical attention is needed, so the man tied him to the chair. He then began to stitch the wound with his bare hands. Every step is a struggle. He realizes he may not last much longer. Just as his consciousness begins to fade, a familiar figure appears before him. It's a top-class warrior from the team, and eagerly went off to search for it. This made the man reflect on how nice it is to have money. Later that night, the waiter hurriedly found the 2. He found them in a small alley. The leader of the Heavenly Dragon team is seriously injured. This made the waiter's eyes light up. 2 people are worth 5 taels of gold. If so many people come, that would be quite a fortune. Having said that, the waiter took the painting. As long as I have seen someone once, I can draw their appearance on paper. Immediately, I found the waiter, and told him that these people on the paper are my friends. If you find them, they will demonstrate here. He bluntly said that since they wanted to fight, they should be prepared to get hit as well. He was very generous in his response. 5 taels of gold just to enjoy a simple meal. Moreover, possessing an unforgettable ability. Find the person in charge of the junior class at the martial arts school to demand an explanation. The commotion attracted the attention of the deputy store owner at the Wulong shop. However, after learning about the situation, he was not angry at all. Instead, he laughed heartily. What if they die? At that moment, the citizen began to worry as well, so he hurriedly fled the scene with his brother. Meanwhile, the parents of the children were informed and were furious. Another person kneeled and kicked him in the face. He quickly raised his hand to block. In the next moment, his body instinctively kicked out, knocking both of them to the ground. Just as the citizen was about to step forward to finish them off, his brother's shout interrupted him. When he comes to his senses, one person has already approached him. He couldn't dodge in time and got hit. It really doesn't hurt. But the next second, at the same time, he recalled what his dad had said. If the other person knows nothing, and is nothing, then just let him get beaten. Anyway, that kind of guy won't feel any pain when he hits you. And moved backward. The man was violently slammed to the ground. He passed out. Gongming couldn't help but ask, "These guys are too weak." When he regained his senses, several more martial artists rushed forward, but these people's punches were too slow. Gongming maneuvered effortlessly among the crowd. Then, the sword maiden suddenly grabbed one person's arm. He struck again. A straight punch flew out. Immediately after, he turned to grab the fist coming at him from behind. With a strong swing, those who spoke disrespectfully have already been thrown far away, unconscious. But at this moment, a dancer in a red robe insulted his father. This made his brother unable to tolerate it any longer. He suddenly leaped into action. With one kick, he knocked a man to the ground. Landing on the ground, often face ridicule from the dancers in the courtyard. Because of their father's status as a top-tier samurai, the younger brother gets angry every time he hears it. But the older brother tells him to ignore them, because their father once said that only trash talks too much. Seeing this, the man couldn't help but worry if the kid would make it back alive. The key is he always calls him Lord Samurai. It makes it so he can't just abandon him. On the other side, the twin boys. He trained diligently every day. At this moment, the warrior behind him hastily woke up. Looking at the man's well-built muscles, he couldn't help but think, "These muscles are huge. Are mostly spies sent by the enemy." After saying that, they set off for the village. The next morning, even while on a mission, the man had not slacked off. They finally escaped safely. The man suggested going to a nearby village to observe for a while, before heading to the rendezvous point, because if they could arrive safely, the guys there. Soon, they managed to distance themselves from the pursuers. He told the warrior to discard his weapons. They disguised themselves as woodcutters. It was the only way to survive. After a long trek, he chased after the warrior who had fled into the distance. At the same time, he also noticed that these guys were a bit strange. It seemed they wanted to capture him alive. But he didn't think much about it. He led the warrior deep into the jungle. As soon as the words fell, his figure suddenly appeared before the enemy. In no time at all, more than half of the enemies in front of him were dead or injured. But there were still pursuers behind. The enemy ordered them to drop their weapons and surrender. The man obediently complied. But just as the samurai beside him was about to put down his weapon, the man suddenly leaped up, shouting loudly, "Good!" Within a few days, they were ambushed. The group was also scattered. In just a moment, only the man and the second-rank samurai were left alive, but also had no sense of vigilance whatsoever. Only this B-level warrior beside him seemed somewhat normal, though he was a bit shy. The man thought this team would eventually meet its end. Sure enough, not only is the morale in the team low, but they haven't gone far. These people have already started complaining about the travel fatigue. What's important is, the leader not only indulged them. This scene caused a passing dancer to stop. He thinks that the instructor must be out of his mind. How could he not see such a good prospect? Meanwhile, the man has already set off to carry out the mission. But he is very angry. The triplets only practiced a basic set of punches. Recently, many experts have taken notice. 2 elderly janitors even decided to take the 2 boys as their apprentices. However, the instructor did not notice the difference. The students in the courtyard even openly mocked them. But this time, several teams were also sent to fight alongside him. The man didn't pay much attention, just confirming that we will set off after sending the children to Tianlong Martial Arts School. At the moment of farewell, the understanding daughter gave him a hug and told him to be careful on the road. This made the man even more certain that his decision was the right one. After that, he found the captain to take on the mission. The man learned about the value of the 5 halls of the Heavenly Dragon during a conversation with the wet nurse. Looking at the sleeping children, he realized that he had been too selfish all along, so he silently made a decision in his heart. The next day, he told the children that he would be leaving home for half a year, to the martial arts school. But at the same time, their studies couldn't be neglected. The children were extremely happy. The daughter even stated that she wanted to become a well-rounded heroine. After sending the children off, after saying that, the old man laughed and walked out of the tavern. This made the originally moved and tearful crowd cast scornful looks. After careful thought, the man finally decided to respect the children's choice. He sent them that he not only bought a house for his father, but also hired servants and maids for him. And in his later years, he said he wanted to marry a wife, so I also found him a matchmaker for that. Before he died, he said his biggest regret was not spending all of my money. So, are you sure your children won't resent you? The man felt a deep inner conflict after hearing this. He planned to go home and have a good talk with the children. But just after the man left, the old man told those around him, "After years of hard work, I achieved some success. It was only then that I realized the mistakes I had made. But when I tried to make amends, my father was already gone. I hated this. So I said some very hurtful things to him. This was undoubtedly a huge blow to my father, who had worked so hard all his life. Fortunately, I met a good mentor, but our family still often went hungry. Yet even so, he still insisted on sending me to school at all costs. Because of this, we often had no food at home. At night, the man treated his friends at the tavern to drown his sorrows. After several rounds of drinks, the old man told the man a story. My father was a farmer. He worked very hard, but when he focused his attention, he found that where the elders' broom swept, there were actually several neatly arranged people. It seems quite similar, but he didn't pay much attention to it, because he still hoped his child could become a knowledgeable scholar. He decided to take her as his apprentice, although the man usually respected the elder. At this moment, he only felt that the elder was boasting. Moreover, he was recently troubled by his child's reluctance to go to school, and he had no interest in the elder. He is actually a master of film and television with extraordinary skills. He has even crossed swords with the world's #1, the leader of the demon cult. Now, he has taken up the life of a humble sweeper in the secular world. He noticed that the man's daughter was exceptionally gifted. The captain was helpless. Then you think it over. But if you refuse, you should take off that outfit. The 70-year-old man. I'll arrange for your child to enter the Tianlong Martial Arts Academy. That's a place everyone in Tianlong City is desperate to get into. But unexpectedly, the man remained unmoved upon hearing this. He even bluntly said he needed to think about it. The captain was very angry. The key point is that Lord Long placed great importance on him, and he couldn't do anything about it. Looks like I have no choice but to use my trump card. If you agree to run an errand. At the same time, the captain of the guard gave him a task, to go to Hunan and bring back a 7-year-old child, but the round trip would take half a year. This made the man refuse the captain on the spot. But how can I let my daughter go there? So he went to negotiate with his daughter. Unexpectedly, his daughter was eloquent. For a moment, he couldn't win the argument. This left the man quite troubled. They were now school age, but they all wanted to enter the martial arts school instead. He doesn't want to go to school. The man thought, it's fine if my son goes to the martial arts school. Amid the screams and roughhousing of the children, 5 years passed in the blink of an eye. Time went by. The man unexpectedly discovered that his martial arts had mostly recovered, and the children had grown up. But at the same time, he was very conflicted, because he didn't want his kids to go down this path. But seeing his son's aggrieved expressions, he made up his mind. Time flies. But this day, when he returned home, he found out that his 2 sons had been beaten black and blue. His daughter told him they were hit by other kids. This made the man furious. He decided to have his children learn martial arts. After that, life seemed to return to normal. The man still worked 9 to 5 for his children. Though his martial arts had regressed, he never neglected his training, and came to the foot of the mountain, constantly using his body to strike the peak. The force was so great that the entire mountain trembled, but still bought the necklace, taking his daughter home. As night fell, the man was dozing off. Suddenly, a wave of heat surged through his body. He rushed out of the house, but the moment he saw the man, his voice abruptly stopped. He immediately put down the necklace, quickly turned, and left. The man found it a bit odd. Just as the man was hesitating, someone else quickly took the necklace in hand. Sorry about that. Young lady, I picked this up first. As he said this, he looked up at the man. He has seen his long-lost child. To make up for the kids, he took his daughter to the market. His daughter was not shy at all. She immediately picked the most expensive necklace. At this time, the 4 major forces of the martial world had also learned of the demon cult's withdrawal, though they did not know the reason behind it. After discussions, they decided to establish a 5-year peace treaty with each other. The man on the other side has now returned home. After doing all this, he transformed into twinkling stars and departed. After Tian Susu became the leader, her first order was to have Zuosher act as the deputy leader. She herself was to eliminate Bloodhorn. Even in the heat of summer, I feel icy all over. All of this has been seen by the leader in the sky. He wanted to do something for his friend Ma Wei before leaving. After that, he passed the leader position to his granddaughter Tian Susu. He ordered her to eliminate Xu Ejia. He now had to order a halt to the wars in the martial world. The reason was that he realized his time was short. And after the man's battle with Tian Susu, not only was I threatened not to step into the martial world, but my martial arts skills have also been greatly regressed. Immediately, Tian Susu struck several palm blows to his chest. Once the leader of a demonic sect that stirred up bloodshed in the martial world, but at this moment, the meridians in his body felt unusually smooth. At this moment, Tian Susu no longer intended to play with him. In a flash, her figure appeared in front of the man. The man quickly raised his hands to block, but his defense was easily broken. He fell to the ground. The man fainted. The man secretly thought it was bad, and astonishingly blocked that powerful strike. The man turned his head to check. He ended up face to face with Tian Susu. The man, seeing this, hurriedly stepped back. He fell right in front of Tian Susu. Then the body flipped backward and slammed hard onto the ground. But just at that moment, a bizarre scene appeared. Tian Susu supported the ground with just one finger. Immediately after, her right hand threw several punches at the man's chest. Fortunately, the man raised his hand just in time to parry. Seeing this, Tian Susu lifted her leg to kick the man. But he seized the opportunity, suddenly grabbed the left hand. Then her figure slowly descended in front of the man. Looking down, he suddenly raised his knee. The man hurriedly lifted his foot to block. But at this moment, Tian Susu suddenly released her right hand. Then her left hand pulled sharply. Her figure suddenly appeared in front of the man. She forcefully pushed against the man's arm. Her body leaned back. Then she locked the man's hands in midair. This powerful force caught the man off guard for a moment. The girl said as she moved in front of Tian Susu, getting into position. "You go ahead first, miss." Tian Susu didn't refuse. Her gaze suddenly locked onto the man. A fierce aura instantly surrounded her. Those without strength always make excuses. This also angered the man. "Then I'm afraid I can't hold back. Or you can fight me." Who is the granddaughter just entering the martial arts world? The man shook his head repeatedly, indicating that he doesn't fight with women. And Tian Susu's expression darkened at this. What game is the leader playing now? Then the leader called for his granddaughter. He is a newcomer to the martial arts world. Those Ronin are his subordinates. You can choose one of them to fight. Before anyone could speak, the leader's voice echoed in everyone's mind. "Do not reveal my true identity." Then he turned to tell the man, "These are all waves." This left the subordinates puzzled, but he suddenly received an order from the leader to halt all activities. Although he was confused, he still led his men to go and find the leader. By the time they arrived, it was already dusk. Just now, hurriedly arriving at the leader's side. At this moment, the leader noticed that the man was wearing the clothes of the Heavenly Dragon Gate. I couldn't help but recall how Ma Wei often mentioned that if he ever took a disciple, he would never let him enter the martial world. Thinking of this, he raised his eyes and looked at the man. "Didn't your master tell you not to step into the martial world?" A few days later, Tian Suzu was preparing to mobilize troops to unify the martial world. He didn't expect that an old friend would teach his disciple this way. So he told the man, "I don't know how strong I am. But all the martial artists I know are stronger than you." The man was greatly disappointed upon hearing this. It turns out he is so weak. This made the man think that, like his master, the leader was also a wanderer. The leader didn't deny it after hearing this. Seeing this, the man took the opportunity to ask how powerful the leader was in the martial arts world, because the master often says his martial arts are very weak. This surprised the leader very much. His figure suddenly appeared behind the disciple. "Where is your leader?" After the man was saved by the little girl, he started a conversation with the leader. From the leader, the man learned that he was a friend of his master. He single-handedly slaughtered the entire blood sect, and the reason was that people often confused the blood sect with the demon sect. She is none other than the granddaughter of the demon sect leader, Tian Susu. With a single palm strike, she sent several disciples flying, before they could even hit the ground. When the little girl, who should have been fast asleep, suddenly grabbed his robe. "Grandpa, stop fighting. That man is a kind-hearted uncle." The man was stunned. What does that mean? At this moment, the man remembered his master's advice to stay out of the martial world. But thinking of his child, he unsteadily assumed a stance again. He absolutely couldn't die here. The cult leader was preparing to strike again. Immediately after, he gave him a beating. Looking at the man's meridians, the master couldn't help but wonder why there was a damaged part. Could it be because of my influence? Then I must take responsibility properly. He simply advanced again. Unexpectedly, it hit the master squarely. The master thought this kid really needs to be taught a lesson. After saying that, he used the celestial demon seal. He struck fiercely at the man's body. The man, coming to his senses, suddenly leaped forward. Then both feet hit the ground. He abruptly pulled the leader and slammed him toward the ground. Unexpectedly, the leader used the momentum to land. The master ignored the man, his blood surging through his veins. The leader saw this, and became even more certain that this was an old friend's technique. "Dillion, just let it through." He then sent a surge of energy into the man's body. The leader watched the incoming punch. "Let me confirm it." With that, he suddenly grabbed the man's arm. With a sharp pull, the man's clothes instantly turned to shreds. His scream thundered out. He was then pushed into the air along with his swords. The man hurriedly adjusted his angle. Holding the dual swords, he fiercely stabbed at the leader. To his surprise, the leader caught both attacking swords with one hand. Then, he suddenly applied force with his fingers, driving both knees forward towards the leader. But the leader caught him with one hand. The man saw this. He raised his dual swords and was about to stab down. Unexpectedly, a sharp pain suddenly shot through his knee. His aura suddenly burst forth. "Can't tell me, can you?" This powerful aura momentarily immobilized the man. He secretly told himself he could do it. Then he suddenly leapt up. The leader didn't want to intervene, but seeing the aura around the man, he couldn't help but think of an old friend's martial arts. He coldly said, "Who is your master?" Seeing the man ignoring him for a long time, he asked the one by the fire about the other children. The man slowly turned his head upon hearing this. They were all killed. The man instantly flew into a rage. He cursed like a beast. Suddenly, a bright light appeared in the forest. The man hid in the shadows, watching secretly. The child was indeed there. But for some reason, there was only one child. The man slowly moved forward. He also didn't know if he could save him. But recalling the recent encounters with martial artists, maybe his martial arts were actually quite strong. That guy might have originally been one of the few masters in the martial world. Thinking this, the man continued to run forward wildly. "Then go by yourself." But what the captain didn't expect was that the man actually planned to go alone. Late at night, the man walked alone through the bamboo forest. He didn't understand why he was risking so much for someone else's child. He was so close to catching up. He wants to buy a little more time. But the captain tells him that the priority now is the evil sect. If we are to go to rescue the children. Now, he received instructions from the Heavenly Dragon Society to withdraw to the city. The reason is that the evil sect is already stirring. There is an emergency situation in the entire martial world, but the man is still unwilling to accept it. He shouted angrily, demanding that they come out and fight fairly. The dark figure slowly transformed into a human shape. "Since you want to, let's have a fight then." Meanwhile, the man had been pursuing the blood vault for 2 whole months. Suddenly, a scream comes from behind. One follower is being slowly lifted into the air by a dark shadow. Then, with a loud bang, they explode into a pool of blood. Only the child in their arms remains suspended in the air. The leader of the cult broke out in a cold sweat upon seeing this. And now he has returned to the Jianghu. The first thing to do is to eradicate the blood sect. The reason is simply that people often equate the blood sect with demonic cults. In a desolate desert, a group of blood sect followers is running while holding children. This way, it will be more convenient for you, master. Isn't that right, master? Wen Yan seems deep in thought. Sounds good, doesn't it? He was once the unrivaled supreme of the martial arts world. He sat in solitude at the mountaintop for 20 years without descending. Only in this way can those hidden players be lured out. Then he can go find those players himself. At this moment, the young sect leader, Wen Yan, finally appears. "Are you planning to unify the martial arts world? Let me take action personally." Inside the Hall of Light, the demonic sect. The sect leader has also learned of the blood sect's return to the world. It's important to know that the blood demon sect and the other sect have always been at odds. Therefore, he orders his subordinates to eliminate Blood Reef, causing chaos in the martial world. He ordered the man to take a few warriors and go ahead to chase the murderer. Then he hurriedly reported it to the Tianlong Association. When Lord Long heard about it, he surprisingly did not blame him. He understood it was the work of the blood sect. So he sent a squad from the Dragon Hall to provide support. But when the man arrived there, he found that the captain of the guards was already there, investigating with several warriors. The man asked why they weren't pursuing to rescue the child, but the response he got was that it needed to be reported and follow protocol. However, the captain made a decision at that moment. He saw a child standing outside the door, tears streaming down their face. The man felt a pang in his heart. He knew that the children he had rescued a few days ago were in trouble. He called the nurse to take care of the child. Then he hurriedly set off for the estate. They then hurriedly fled with several children. What they didn't know was that one child had heard the commotion and quietly hidden in the lounge. At that moment, the man had just put the children to sleep. Suddenly, he heard footsteps coming from outside the door. He wanted to become stronger. At night, several warriors wearing skull masks attacked a residence within Tianlong City. They moved swiftly. Their methods were brutal. In no time, they assassinated all the adults in the residence. That practicing our martial arts means enduring constant beatings. Only by persevering can one achieve greatness. Even when facing a powerful enemy, you won't be beaten to death. Thinking of this, he began ramming into the mountain again and again. Even after his master left without a word, he has never slackened. He looks at the cracked walls. In a daze, he seemed to see his master's figure again. The master had said many times before. He slowly sat on the throne in the hall. He is Tian Mingyu, the strongest supreme leader of the demon sect, who once looked down upon the world and shocked the entire martial arts community. At this moment, the man is continuously crashing his body against the mountain peak. He practices like this every day, tirelessly. It's unclear how much time passed. He arrived at a grand hall. Several rows of disciples stood around. Amid shouts, the demon arrives, bringing light to the world. I discover that it is actually an old man. I see him slowly rising. accompanied by a loud laugh. He shook off the surrounding clutter, then slowly walked down the mountain. Bring me back the living sacrifice. At the top of a mountain range, there is not a blade of grass growing. Yet there stands an ancient tree, having lingered here for many years. But as I approach, the blood demon squad of the high priest was completely annihilated. At the scene, only a badge of a grade A warrior was found. The man referred to as the high priest scoffed, a mere grade A warrior? Are you kidding me? Investigate it thoroughly for me as soon as possible. Blood gushes out, accompanied by the man's furious roar. The crowd of followers also cried out. The ritual quickly ended. Several subordinates found the man. A seductively dressed woman in red dances gracefully. Kneeling beside her is a group of red-clad followers, murmuring a somber song. Suddenly, a man appears behind the woman. In the next moment, his head is severed from his body. Are my injuries really that serious? But when he looked closer, it turned out to be little snacks he had rubbed off himself. This is a bizarre ritual. In the center of the altar, he was soaking in a vat of medicinal liquid. As the liquid absorbed his presence, it grew even darker. This made him start to wonder. But Lord Long thought to himself, let him taste a bit of sweetness, then he'll be motivated to do a good job. And after last night's battle, the man was severely weakened. It seems the world is about to be in chaos. Thinking of this, he instructed his subordinates to properly arrange for the rescued children, and give him another shady deal. Upon hearing this, his subordinate was puzzled. If the demon sect really takes action, is it possible that the world's martial respect will re-emerge? The 5 strongest martial artists in the world, with a single palm, can open mountains and seal borders. They have far exceeded the limits of humanity. The problem is not the blood sect, but the demonic sect that has long disappeared from the world. If members of the demonic sect appear, then it means the one behind them will return to the martial world, he thought to himself. His subordinates, upon hearing this, but it's a legacy in my heart. Could it be the blood sect? Lord Long heard this, and nodded slightly. The man thought he would definitely help him, so he shared his experiences from last night with him. Unexpectedly, after learning about this, Lord Long took it very seriously. He immediately summoned his spies, and ordered them to investigate the matter as soon as possible. The man was deeply disappointed. He even thought about using his own money to find them a home, but that money was saved for his own children. At a loss for what to do, he met Lord Long. Watching the children play with their own kids, the man quietly made a decision. He approached the captain of the guard, hoping that the Tianlong Guild could aid the village, but the captain rejected him on the spot. Moving aside the jars behind them, he discovered a few children hidden inside. The man's heart softened, because he was also a father of 3 children. He took the children back to his home. Moments later, the pitch-black village was left with nothing but the roar of pouring rain. As the lightning illuminated the village once more, the man stood amidst the devastation, wreckage all around him. He slowly walked toward the remaining villagers. This allowed the other robbers to clearly see Lan's appearance. In an instant, they surrounded him tightly. Lan quietly counted the number of enemies in his mind. As lightning struck again, his figure suddenly appeared beside the robbers. At this moment, a robber has stealthily circled behind the man. He draws a dagger and thrusts it fiercely at the man's back. A strange smile appears on his face. Yet the man, driven mad by bloodlust, feels no pain at all. With just a single turn, he stepped on the robber. What awaited him was a stone smashing into his forehead. As the light once again extinguishes, in the pitch-black rainy night, screams rise all around. Every flash of lightning is the battle cry for the man's attack. Extinguishing the ray of light that illuminated the night, the village was suddenly plunged into darkness. A bandit saw this. He hurriedly pulled out a fire starter, but as the flames slowly lit up, they specifically targeted villages with many elderly, women, and children. And this scene just happened to be witnessed by the man while he was out. For the first time in his life, he felt this furious. He secretly swore to kill all these beasts. He picked up a stone. The man was furious. He had never been this angry in his life. Rumor had it that a few bandits had recently appeared near the outskirts of town. Their methods were brutal, shocking everyone. The man felt a bit helpless, but he still continued on his journey. But as he passed through a village outside the city, he saw corpses scattered everywhere, and witnessed beasts slaughtering innocents and kidnapping children. He didn't return until late at night. He was still busy making his way back to the city, but at that moment, the sky suddenly filled with dark clouds, and a torrential downpour raged on. If it affects the city, then the Heavenly Dragon Society will definitely take action. He told himself this. Not long after, the man left the city to handle business. Due to delays along the way, children had been disappearing lately, but the man didn't pay much attention to it. Still, he speculated that someone would be doing such things near Tianlong City. Then this force must have considerable strength. and life seemed to return to normal. The man has been spending much more time with the child. But just then, the nanny, who had gone out to buy groceries, told the man that there were rumors of kidnappers recently appearing in the suburbs. But this also served Lord Long's purpose. He successfully confirmed the wife's abilities. As long as something important arises in the future, he can send him again. After that, a long time passed. The man also had more time to spend with his child. However, when Lord Long found out about this, he was not angry at all. Instead, he burst out laughing. He guessed that the man intentionally failed the mission. He chose to compromise. But such things became more and more common. As a result, the man began to deliberately sabotage the tasks. After that, the tasks did decrease. When he first joined the Tianlong Society, wasn't it to stay away from martial conflicts? He angrily accused the captain of deceiving him, making him do such dangerous things for them. But in the face of money, the leading man could only cry in despair, obediently handing over what the man wanted. Although he completed the task with ease, the man did not show a hint of happiness, because this strayed from his original intent. His fists were like shooting stars, his legs like lightning. After a few rounds, the group of burly men didn't harm him at all. Instead, they were all beaten to the ground. Then go ahead and take them down before you take them away. The man remained silent upon hearing this. He simply stood up slowly. Before anyone could react, the man's silhouette moved first. They only sent a little warrior to demand I hand over the item. But the man turned his head away. If you don't want to give it, then fine. This only fueled the anger in the big man's heart. He pointed behind the man. A few days later, the man set off for the mission location. He was received by several hulking, muscular men. They looked at the man who came alone, and couldn't help but feel anger. The man was tempted by the money, and without thinking, he became determined. So, to celebrate getting this lucrative job, he bought a koan and brought it home for the kids, and told them he was going to leave. He realized the man possessed unparalleled martial arts skills. The important thing is, the man had no idea how powerful his skills were. That day, he offered a generous reward again, asking the man to retrieve something for him. He distanced himself from the martial conflicts. He came to Tianlong Association and became a gatekeeper. Although the work was monotonous, the pay was excellent. But Lord Long of the Tianlong Association didn't see it that way. This greatly disappointed the man, because he did not want his children to walk this irreversible path. Once, the man aspired to conquer the martial world. He trained diligently every day to become the number one under heaven. But after having children, shadows flew out from within. Months later, the man's child had turned 1 year old. He prepared many items for the children to choose from. But the triplets seemed uninterested in any of these things. They simply crawled toward the accessories at the guard's waist as if they were drawn. Several masked samurai in black slowly approached. The leader softly said, "Leave no trace." As soon as the words fell, the samurai behind him instantly vanished into thin air. Not long after, the building was engulfed in flames. In the House of the Dead, the minister is starting to question everything. How could an ordinary grade A samurai reduce an elite unit like this? Just as the minister was preparing to contact headquarters, a sudden scream came from outside the door. Although the task was resolved in no time, it left the man with some doubts. Why were the robbers' punches so deadly? But he didn't think too much about it. Just hummed a tune and went home to hold his baby. But when the fists landed on him, he realized the power was no joke. The man winced in pain at that moment. A few swift punches were thrown, ending with a perfect sweeping kick. He immediately grabbed his subordinate by the face. He roared to go capture that warrior for me. Soon after, several masked men blocked the man who was heading home from work. The man thought they were just a few ordinary ruffians, so he let them attack him freely. A minister was in a furious rage. He berated his subordinates, calling them useless. 5 squads not only failed to capture a young girl, but were completely wiped out by a grade A warrior. As he spoke, he stomped his foot hard on the ground, but clearly when I secretly caught him selling the gate, he didn't show any vigilance at all. And so, the man, amidst the constant flattery of his fellow escorts, set off on his journey home. Meanwhile, at the Tower of the Dead, no one in Lord Zhilong's hall dared to order around the gate guards anymore. The leader couldn't help but wonder in his heart. Those bandits were clearly skilled fighters. Yet he said they weren't experts. Could it be that he himself is a master, one even he doesn't realize? He was fortunately strong in body. After resting for a bit, he was mostly fine. Thus, he and the girl hid in the deep mountains for 2.5 days, before safely returning to the courtyard. After that day, he engaged in a life-and-death battle with the warriors. After a fierce battle, the man successfully repelled a group of warriors. However, he paid a considerable price. Although he was stabbed multiple times, the battered man appeared at the door with the girl. This left everyone speechless in shock. It turns out that day, the man ran deep into the mountains with the girl in his arms, with the warriors relentlessly pursuing them. In desperation, if anything happens to that child, the entire Tianlong men will be in crisis. They searched the entire mountain but couldn't find the child. Everyone inside the house was in a frantic panic, but just at that moment, their only goal was to take the girl away from the man. In a state of desperation, the man took the girl and hid in the deep mountains. They went missing for 2.5 days. This news caused a sensation among the Dao Knife sect and the Tianlong men. The man had to turn and run into the mountains. At the same time, he began to wonder, why are these martial artists so weak? The man was just out earning some money for baby formula. Yet he ended up being chased by bandits. His form did not stop because of this. Instead, he aimed directly at the warrior's face. After landing, he continued to charge forward. But there were too many enemies ahead. With no other choice, he then continued to charge forward. Unexpectedly, a warrior had already raised his sword above him. The man lightly tapped the ground with his right foot. He then kicked fiercely at the warrior with his left foot. The long sword was shattered by his kick. As long as he could get around the wall, he could reach the main gate. Thinking of this, he held the girl tighter. He dashed toward the warrior, and after about 5 steps, he suddenly stopped in his tracks. His right leg drew a perfect arc in the air, and dared not move recklessly. Unexpectedly, the man picked up the little girl in front of him and ran off. He smashed through the high wall and reached the courtyard, but he didn't expect that the enemy had also climbed over the wall to block his way. The man frowned. This left the man completely at a loss. In desperation, he could only draw his sword and roar, "Stop!" With that, the man strode toward the masked men. The samurai was shaken to the core by the deep voice. Meanwhile, the man is thinking about how to escape. He doesn't want to take such a big risk to help others. But when he comes to his senses, the little girl was already running toward him. A group of masked men followed closely behind her. Several samurai have arrived in front of the little girl. Just as the girl was about to be abducted, a shadow suddenly appeared beside her. Half of the samurai charging toward the girl were instantly killed or injured. He tells the girl to run to the guard. Just as the man was curious about what Xiaohei was, a group of masked warriors leapt over the high wall. In an instant, they kidnapped a few children who had run far away. Not only were they well coordinated, but they were also large in number. However, a little girl watching from the side couldn't stand it. She stood up for the man. He chased away the group of kids. He noticed the man had exceptional skills, because Xiaohei was very afraid of this man. However, a sharp-eyed boy noticed the badge hanging from the man's waist. It turned out to be a first-class warrior, but he was merely a cannon fodder from the Heavenly Dragon Gate. The man felt somewhat helpless about the situation, but he didn't argue with the children. After a satisfying meal, the man went for a walk in the backyard, but he found a group of children already playing and making noise there. At that moment, the children also noticed the man. They witnessed the warriors of Tianlong sect. The children's eyes filled with admiration. He instructs his subordinates to be careful with their words. The group of 5 finally reined themselves in. The team quickly arrived at their destination. After some brief pleasantries with the leader, the master invited everyone inside to take a seat. They looked down on the guards watching the gate behind them. Some even openly mock them, saying they will only drag them down. Though the guards are dissatisfied, they only dare to feel angry but not speak out. Fortunately, the leader of the group is a shrewd man, but the offer was simply too generous. The man could only accept the task with tears in his eyes. The next day, after a quick farewell to his children, they joined the escort team. Leading the group are 5 from the Dragon Hall. All of this is because he has 3 young children to take care of. That day, the guard captain came to him. A lord had specifically requested the man to be his guard for 5 days. The man initially didn't want to agree, because that would mean leaving his children for 5 days. Only then did he sleep peacefully. He persisted in climbing steep cliffs every day, and breaking boulders weighing thousands of pounds. But even such a hard-working man, now willingly serves as a mere gatekeeper at the Tianlong Guild, and smiled with relief. But just as he was about to sleep, but suddenly, he remembered. What if he rolled over and crushed the baby while sleeping? Thinking of this, he tied his legs to the bedpost with a rope. Even though he gave it his all, the triplets were still full of energy, crying loudly. They fussed like this until midnight. The triplets finally fell asleep. The man looked at the baby sleeping in his arms. What an interesting fellow. But where should I place this pawn? At this moment, the man had not yet fallen asleep due to lulling the child to sleep late into the night. As a mere warrior, he was skilled at fighting. When it comes to putting the kids to sleep, even Lord Long himself wasn't quite sure of his strength. Thinking of Lord Long ordering his subordinates to go out, and instructing them to investigate thoroughly as soon as possible. After his subordinates left, the corners of his mouth slightly curled up, but when he asked the man about his master, he couldn't answer where he trained. This piqued Lord Long's curiosity. What kind of monster was cultivated by such an extraordinary mentor? The key was that he didn't even know how strong he really was. His identity is still under investigation. I just don't understand what merits he has that Lord Long values. The man referred to as Lord Long, Master 1, did not speak. He just recalled the details of that day. He could tell the man possessed extraordinary skills. It seems everything is moving in a positive direction. Night falls. In a study in Dragon City, a nameless warrior is reporting to the man behind the desk with cupped fists. He has already been arranged to become a Class A warrior. He also received the badge of a Grade A warrior from the Tianlong Association. His task was to guard the front gate. Though the job was humble, the man was enjoying himself. He was extremely happy. As soon as she entered the room, she tidied it up thoroughly, and whenever they hear the baby's cries, they immediately pick up the baby with care and feed them. The man successfully found a wet nurse. The first thing he needed to do was to find a wet nurse, but those who came to apply were either full of grand theories, or old and past their prime. Just when he felt helpless, an ant caught his attention, unsure if he could take care of them. But he made up his mind that he would ensure they had a good life. The next morning, he moved into Heavenly Dragon City with the baby. However, this time it was different. The people from the Tianlong Society heard his request, and not only did they not throw him out, but they also fulfilled all his needs. At night, the man looked at the 3 babies on the bed. Find a wet nurse for the baby. The examiner was taken aback. He threw the man out. Fortunately, the Heavenly Dragon Society, one of the 4 major forces, is also hiring. The man still easily passed the assessment. But when it came to registration, the man raised a bunch of conditions. Not only did he want room and board, the workplace has to be close to home. If possible, the man remained silent upon hearing this. He simply threw another straight punch. The huge punching bag shattered in response. Without a doubt, the man passed the test. He threw a straight punch. The wobbling doll started to sway from side to side. Seeing this, the examiner scoffed. You can't break that. When you hit it, it will absorb all your force. Not for selecting entrance-level warriors, but even so, the man still wanted to give it a try. The examiner didn't object. The man got into position. The daily persistence has forged a strong physique. Now, he easily passes the entrance exam of the Sword and Blade School. As the examiner leads him inside, a massive figure catches his attention. Seeing this, the examiner explains that it is an item used for assessing formal disciples. The man passed the test successfully, but doubt arose in his mind. He wondered why the exam of one of the 4 great forces was so easy. Every day, the man had to climb a 100-jung tall cliff, shattering a 1,000-pound boulder. The third test was to split a wooden shield half his height with the provided machete. The dancers had been slashing for half a day, but the wooden stump remained intact, yet the man just lightly swung his blade, and the stump instantly split in 2. In an instant, it would be a bloody mess. The man thought for a moment, and then suddenly leaped forcefully with his feet. In the next second, he easily arrived on the other side. This scene left even the seasoned examiners speechless. The second test was to leap over a pit filled with blades. This not only tested agility, but also courage. If you are not careful for a moment, you could fall down. No one had any faith in the small and skinny man. They all cast disdainful glances at him, but the man simply hugged the stone and lifted it lightly. The stone was instantly raised high above his head. This left the group of people beside him dumbfounded. He must first pass an exam. So the man goes to the examination hall. It's already filled with fighters from all over. Dancers have come here to take the exam. The first challenge is to lift a stone weighing 1,000 pounds overhead. Not only is there ample time, but the pay is also high. What's important is that it's also very safe. The man is intrigued. But to join the Sword and Blade sect, he went outside to look for work, but he kept running into obstacles. Just when he was at a loss, he learned from a shopkeeper about a piece of news. One of the 4 major powers in the martial arts world, the Sword and Blade sect, is recruiting warriors. Late at night, while sorting through her belongings, he discovered the savings his wife had kept for him over the years. This would be enough for him and the baby to eat well for years, but it was still far from enough. As soon as dawn broke, he spoke to his wife. Even if it means sacrificing myself, I will raise the baby. He endured the pain, and buried his wife alone. But because of this, his wife left him forever. The man wept bitterly. He cursed the heavens for their unfairness, but looking at the crying babies in his arms, he knew he didn't have much time to grieve. He can only choose one. The man resolutely chose his wife. But when his wife heard this, she firmly opposed it. No matter what, he was determined to bring the child into this world. In the end, his wife gave birth to triplets, 2 boys and a girl. At this moment, he feels like the happiest person in the world. But even so, fate played a cruel joke on him. His wife is in labor. Save the baby or save the mother? So, she started to work hard to earn money. She wanted to give him a better life. Not long after that, she became pregnant. The man was extremely happy. And her demeanor was graceful. From the first moment he saw her, he fell deeply in love. After that, the man married her. She herself didn't understand why he chose her as his wife. She only knew that he was very important to her. Every day was a blur for him. At that moment, he met the woman who would change his life. She was the complete opposite of men. Her speech was elegant, but in the end, he still went, because he believed that his strength could make a name for himself. But upon entering the Jianghu, he encountered strong enemies. After that, he became a wanderer once again. He gained a small reputation in the circle. He told himself like this: the master must be a martial arts expert. That's why he couldn't defeat him. The master often told him not to step into the martial world. He is determined to become the best in the world. So he climbs the towering cliffs day after day. The mountain top is his training ground. The rocks are his sparring partners. Finally, after his master departed, his master is just a nobody in the martial world. An unknown figure. The master told him, this level is enough to sustain himself. But he is not satisfied with that. The man only sleeps 2 hours a day. The rest of the time is spent practicing martial arts. But even so, he has never beaten his skinny master. And what's more infuriating is,